The first person who stopped Justin's launch wasn't me. It was Samuel Hill, the procurement director from Prairie Grid Manufacturing. He walked into our restored warehouse on Harrison Avenue, looked past the welcome table, the new company banner, and my brother's enormous photograph on the wall. Then he asked, loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Where's Amanda?" Justin was standing beside the stage in a new navy suit. His smile stayed in place, but his left hand tightened around his presentation remote. "I'm Amanda," I said. Samuel turned toward me. "Good. We're supposed to begin the Prairie Grid work session before lunch." My father stared at me from across the room. My mother took one quick step forward. Justin looked like he wanted to answer for all three of them. That was the moment their plans started coming apart. My name is Amanda Morales, and I'm 34. If you've ever been treated like the dependable one until someone else wanted the credit, you'll understand why this stayed with me. Like the video and subscribe. What happened next took 10 years to build, so I need to take you back to the empty warehouse where it started. In 2016, Morales Process Solutions was barely a company. My parents had filed the paperwork and put money into it, but that was about it. The office was an old cotton warehouse in Guthrie, Oklahoma. Half the windows were painted shut. The break room consisted of a folding table, a used microwave, and a refrigerator my father found through a church friend. The front door scraped the concrete every time it opened. My mother called the place full of potential. I called it dusty, usually while coughing. Dad had spent years supervising maintenance crews for manufacturing plants. He understood machines and the people who fixed them. Mom had handled billing for 2 small contractors. Their idea was to help factories organize the work that always fell between departments. Maintenance requests, shutdown planning, parts tracking, vendor schedules, safety paperwork, things like that. They knew there was a need. They didn't know how to package it into a service. I did. At the time, I was working for a regional equipment supplier in Oklahoma City. I had health insurance, regular hours, and a manager who trusted me. My apartment was small, but it was mine. On Friday nights, I could close my laptop and know nobody would call because a shipment was sitting at the wrong loading dock. Then Dad invited me to breakfast. He picked a diner near my apartment and arrived 20 minutes early. That was how I knew he wanted something. Dad was early when he was nervous and late when he assumed you'd wait. Mom sat beside him with a yellow legal pad in front of her. "We've got the building," Dad said after I ordered coffee. "We've got enough money to carry expenses for a while. What we need now is somebody who understands systems." Mom touched the legal pad. "Somebody we trust." I looked from one of them to the other. "Are you offering me a job?" "We're offering you a chance to build something with us," Dad said. That sounded better than it was, but I didn't know that yet. I asked about salary. Mom gave me a number that was almost 20% below what I was making. Dad leaned back in the booth. "At first. And later?" "Later. When the business is stable, we'll formalize your ownership." I remember the exact way he said it. Not maybe. Not if things go well. "When the business is stable." Mom nodded. "This would be yours too, Amanda. That's the whole point of keeping it in the family." I asked whether they had discussed percentages. Dad frowned slightly. "We haven't even opened the doors." "I know. That's why I'm asking now." "You always get stuck on the paperwork," he said. Mom gave a little laugh, like I was being cautious in a charming way. Then she reached across the table and covered my hand. "Your father and I would never take advantage of you." The waitress came with my coffee. I watched the cream spread across the surface while I tried to picture leaving my job. "Where does Justin fit into this?" I asked. Dad's face changed. "Not much, but enough." My older brother was 38 in the present day, which made him 28 then. He'd already moved through real estate, commercial insurance, restaurant management, and a sales job he described as consulting. Every career ended because his boss was threatened by him, his partner lacked vision, or the market turned at the exact wrong time. "He doesn't," Dad said. "Justin's doing his own thing." Mom looked down at her legal pad. I noticed, but I let it go. That was one of my bad habits with my family. I saw the uncomfortable part, then helped everyone step around it. I asked for 2 days to think. Dad said, "Of course." Mom said, "We need an answer by Friday." It was Wednesday. On Thursday evening, Justin called me. "Mom says you're joining the family empire," he said. "There's no empire. There isn't even a working printer." He laughed. "That's Dad. Buys a warehouse before office supplies. Did they ask you to join?" There was a pause. "A while ago," he said. "It's not really my lane." "What did they ask you to do? Business development? Leadership stuff?" That answer bothered me. Not because I wanted Justin excluded. I wanted to know why Dad had told me Justin didn't fit into the plan when they'd already discussed a role with him. "Are you going to do it?" "No. I've got bigger opportunities moving." Justin always had a bigger opportunity moving. They just never seemed to arrive. Then his voice softened. "You'd be good at it, though. You like fixing messes." He meant it as a compliment. On Friday, I accepted my parents' offer. I wish I could tell you I demanded a written ownership agreement first. I didn't. Dad had promised. Mom had backed him. They were my parents, and I still believed family promises became more reliable when they involved sacrifice. I gave notice at my job and started at the warehouse 3 weeks later. My first morning, Dad handed me a ring with 11 keys. "What do these open?" I asked. He shrugged. "You'll figure it out." That was my orientation. The warehouse had one finished office near the front, and Dad had already claimed it. Mom used a desk inside what had once been the shipping office. My workspace was a metal table beside 2 filing cabinets. One drawer contained old invoices from a plumbing company that had left the building years earlier. The other contained mouse droppings. I spent the morning cleaning. Around noon, Dad came out carrying a cardboard box full of trade magazines. "I need a list of services by Monday," he said. "What services have you already discussed? Maintenance coordination, process improvement, vendor management. Those are categories. What exactly are we selling? That's what I need you to define." He set the box on my clean table. I asked, "Who's our target customer? Manufacturers. What size? Whatever size needs help. What problem are we solving first?" Dad looked annoyed. "Amanda, if I had all the answers, I wouldn't need you." He walked back into his office. I sat there with dust on my jeans and understood that I hadn't been hired to improve a company. I'd been hired to invent one. That afternoon, I made 3 columns on a whiteboard. What factories complained about, what they paid outside vendors to handle, and what we could realistically deliver. I knew the supplier side of industrial work. I'd seen repair requests disappear into email chains. I'd watched supervisors discover too late that a required part had never been ordered. I'd seen shutdowns delayed because one contractor didn't know another contractor had changed the schedule. So I built our first service around that. We would map how work moved through a plant, identify where requests stalled, and create a practical system employees would actually use. Nothing fancy. No giant software platform. No promises about transforming an entire company in a month. We would make work visible, assign responsibility, and follow it until it was finished. On Monday, I gave Dad a 6-page service outline. He read the first page, flipped through the rest, and said, "Can you make this sound less complicated?" "It is complicated. Clients don't want complicated." Then we explain it clearly. We don't pretend it's simple. Dad pushed the pages back across his desk. "You've always had trouble selling the big picture." I took the pages and returned to my metal table. An hour later, Mom came over carrying 2 sandwiches. "Your father likes it," she said. "He said I don't understand the big picture. That means he likes it but wants changes." "No, Mom. That means he criticized it." She placed a sandwich beside my keyboard. "Don't make every comment personal." I looked at her. She smiled and tapped the pages. "Fix whatever he wants fixed. You're better at that part." There it was again. I fixed things. Justin had leadership qualities. Dad had vision. Mom kept the peace. Nobody could explain what any of those labels meant, but we all had to stay inside them. I revised the service outline. Over the next 2 months, I created our intake forms, pricing sheets, project schedules, vendor standards, and reporting templates. I met with an insurance agent. interviewed bookkeepers, and found a payroll company after Mom admitted she'd assumed I would handle payroll myself. Dad attended local business lunches and came back with stacks of cards. "Follow up with these," he'd say. I followed up. Most people didn't answer. A few agreed to meetings because they knew Dad. During those meetings, Dad talked about efficiency and common sense. When the questions became specific, he turned to me. "Amanda can explain our approach." So I explained. Afterward, Dad would say, "You need to keep it shorter." Then he'd use my exact explanation at the next meeting. Our first small job came from a machine shop outside Edmond. They needed help organizing preventive maintenance records before an insurance review. Dad estimated 1 week. It took 3. The shop manager kept changing what he wanted. Half the equipment records were handwritten. One technician refused to use the new form because he said the old notebook worked fine. I spent 2 days beside that technician, entering old dates and listening to him complain. On the 3rd day, he picked up the form without being asked. That tiny moment mattered to me. It meant the system worked because the person using it had stopped seeing it as extra work. The shop passed its review. They paid our invoice. Mom taped a copy of the check to the break room refrigerator. Dad brought donuts. Justin arrived just before lunch. He wore a pale blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He walked through the warehouse like he was visiting a project he'd funded. "So this is the operation," he said. "You've been here before," I reminded him, "not when it was running." Dad came out of his office grinning. "Your sister got our first one across the line." Justin picked up a donut. "Look at you." I waited for Dad to mention that I'd designed the service, corrected the estimate, and handled the client. Instead, he started telling Justin about a possible manufacturing contact in Stillwater. Justin chewed while Dad talked. "I could probably make an introduction," he said. "You should come to the business lunch next Thursday," Dad told him. I said I thought business development wasn't his lane. The room went quiet for 1 second. Justin looked at me with raised eyebrows. Dad opened the donut box and examined what was left. Mom came in from the front office. "Why can't your brother help?" I didn't say he couldn't. "It sounded like you did," she said. Justin held up one hand. "I don't want to step on anybody's toes." "You're not," Dad said immediately. Then Dad looked at me. "We need every connection we can get." I could have argued. Instead, I asked Justin for the contact's name. He smiled. "I'll send it over." He never did. The business lunch came and went. Justin didn't attend. Dad said his schedule had changed. 2 weeks later, the shop manager referred us to another plant. That plant didn't hire us, but its operations supervisor gave me the name of someone at Prairie Grid Manufacturing, Samuel Hill. I called him the next morning. His assistant transferred me to voicemail. I left a short message and sent a 1-page description of our service. 3 days passed without an answer. Dad told me to move on. On the 4th day, Samuel called while I was kneeling beside the office printer with the paper tray pulled out. "This is Samuel Hill from Prairie Grid," he said. "You sent me something about work order delays." I stood so fast I hit my shoulder on the printer shelf. "Yes, thank you for calling. Your email said you don't start with software." "That's right." "What do you start with?" "The people who are already doing the work." There was silence on the line. Then he said, "Can you come by Tuesday?" I wrote the time on my hand because the printer was still scattered across the floor. After the call, I went to Dad's office. He was reading an email from Justin and barely looked up. "Prairie Grid wants a meeting," I said. That got his attention. "When?" "Tuesday morning." He stood and buttoned his shirt cuffs. "Good. I'll handle the presentation." I kept my hand closed around the blue ink on my palm. "I made the contact," I said. "I should lead it." Dad studied me for a moment. Then he smiled, not warmly, but like I'd finally shown him something useful. "All right," he said. "Show me what you can do." I returned to my table, shut off my email, and opened a blank presentation. Before Dad could change his mind, I sent Samuel a calendar invitation, listing myself as the meeting lead. For the next 3 days, I worked on nothing else. I built the presentation around one maintenance request, moving through Prairie Grid. A supervisor noticed a problem, entered a request, waited for approval, checked on parts, scheduled labor, and closed the job. At every step, I added the question nobody liked asking: who owns this now? Dad reviewed my slides Monday afternoon. He stopped at the fourth one. Take your name off the footer. Why? It looks small. It's my contact information. We're presenting as a company. Then we should put the company information beside it. He shook his head. Just remove it. I did. That was the kind of argument I kept deciding wasn't worth having. Tuesday morning, Dad drove us to Prairie Grid in his truck. He talked the whole way there about relationships. According to him, industrial work came down to whether somebody trusted you enough to answer the phone. I was holding a folder with the presentation, sample forms, and a 30-day project outline. Did you review the project outline? I asked. I looked at it. What part? Amanda, I'm trying to keep us both calm. I am calm. Then stop quizzing me. We parked outside Prairie Grid's administrative building. It was low and beige, with a row of visitor spaces facing the highway. Dad checked his teeth in the rearview mirror. Let me open, he said. You handle the details. That was the agreement we made in the parking lot. Samuel met us in a conference room with a long gray table and a television mounted on the wall. He wore a white shirt with no tie and carried the one-page description I'd sent him. He'd made notes in the margin. Dad shook his hand with both of his. Dennis Morales. We spoke briefly at the manufacturing breakfast last spring. Samuel nodded. I remember. Dad looked pleased. Samuel shook my hand next. You're Amanda. Yes, you wrote this. I did. Good. Sit down. Dad opened with the story of the company. He talked about his years in manufacturing, the warehouse, and his belief that common sense had disappeared from modern operations. Samuel listened for about 3 minutes. Then he asked, What would you need from us during the first week? Dad turned to me. I explained that I'd need a list of open maintenance requests, access to the supervisors who submitted them, and permission to follow several jobs from request through completion. Samuel asked what software we used. We don't require a specific one, I said. I need to see what your people already have before I recommend anything. What if our system is the problem? It might be, but sometimes the system gets blamed because nobody agreed on who makes the next decision. Samuel glanced at my project outline. How long before you can tell the difference? 2 weeks, Dad said. Probably sooner. I kept my eyes on Samuel. 2 weeks. He leaned back. Your father thinks sooner. My father hasn't seen your work orders yet. Dad shifted beside me. Samuel looked down, but I caught the beginning of a smile. He spent the next 40 minutes asking questions. Most of them were practical. How would I handle supervisors who wouldn't participate? What if the parts department blamed maintenance? What if the delays were caused by management approvals? I answered the best I could. When I didn't know, I said I'd need to see the process. Dad interrupted twice to make our service sound larger. He mentioned building a proprietary model. We didn't have one. He referred to our project team. Our project team was me. Each time, I translated his promise into something we could actually do. By the end, Samuel had stopped looking at Dad when he asked questions. He closed the folder. I can approve a limited assessment. 30 days. If it's useful, we discuss next steps. Dad sat forward. That's exactly what we had in mind. Samuel looked at me. You'll be leading it? Yes, put that in the scope. I will. He walked us to the lobby. Before we left, he handed me a temporary access form. Send this back with your identification, he said. I'll have a badge ready Monday. Dad didn't receive a form. In the truck, he waited until we were out of the parking lot. You contradicted me in there. About what? The timeline. You said sooner without knowing what they have. You could have backed me up. If I promise 1 week and need 2, Samuel won't trust either of us. Dad gripped the steering wheel. There's a way to say that without making me look uninformed. I stared through the passenger window at a row of fast food signs. We got the project, I said. Yes, we did. The word we should have felt good. Instead, it made something settle between my ribs. At the warehouse, Mom was waiting with a grocery store cake. She'd asked them to write our company name in blue icing. They'd misspelled solutions. She hugged Dad first. I knew you could do it. Then she hugged me and whispered, I hope you didn't make your father feel unnecessary. I pulled back. What? He said you corrected him in the meeting. He gave them a timeline we hadn't agreed on. Mom glanced toward Dad's office. He's sensitive about not being the technical one. He has 30 years of plant experience. You know what I mean. I did know. Dad had created the idea, so he needed to feel like he had created every part of it. My job was to be capable without making my capability visible enough to bother him. Mom cut the cake and gave Dad the piece with Morales on it. I got the misspelled part of solutions. That evening, we went to my parents' house for dinner. Mom had invited Justin because it was a family milestone. He arrived late with a bottle of wine. He set it on the counter and hugged Dad. Big closer, he said. Dad laughed. It went well. I was carrying plates from the kitchen. We start Monday. Justin took his usual seat at the table. It was the chair to Dad's right, even when he arrived after the food was served. What are they paying? He asked. I told him the amount for the assessment. He whistled. For paperwork? It's not paperwork. You know what I mean. No, I don't. Mom placed a bowl of potatoes between us. Let's not turn dinner into work. Dad spent most of the meal describing the meeting. In his version, Samuel had been skeptical until Dad explained his philosophy. Then I stepped in with supporting details. I waited for him to mention that Samuel had required me to lead the project. He didn't. Justin asked, So what happens if they like it? We expand, Dad said. More people, bigger contracts, maybe a second location one day. Justin nodded slowly. That could be interesting. I saw Mom notice. Her whole face became more attentive. You should come by more often, she said. I've been busy. We understand, Dad told him. Justin had missed the first client lead he promised to send. He'd skipped the business lunch. He hadn't helped clean the warehouse, write a service, or make a call. Nobody asked him to explain. I had left a stable job and taken a pay cut. Dad was still upset that I'd given a realistic answer in a client meeting. Halfway through dinner, Mom got up to refill the water pitcher. I stood automatically. Sit, she said. You've had a big day. It was such a small kindness that I almost felt ashamed for being angry. Then she handed me the empty bread basket. Actually, bring a few more rolls. I went into the kitchen. Through the doorway, I heard Dad say to Justin, There'll always be room when you're ready. I stopped beside the counter. Justin lowered his voice, but I could still hear him. I don't want Amanda thinking I'm coming in over her. Dad answered quickly. You wouldn't be. There was a short silence. Then Justin said, Okay. I stood there holding the basket. Mom came in with the water pitcher and saw my face. What's wrong? What did Dad mean? She opened the freezer and took out a bag of rolls. About what? There'll always be room when Justin's ready. Mom placed the rolls in the basket one at a time. Your brother may want to help later. Doing what? I don't know, sales maybe. Dad told me he wasn't part of the company. He isn't. He just told Justin there'll always be room. Amanda, those things can both be true. I lowered my voice. You promised me ownership, and we meant it. How much? She stopped touching the rolls. We're celebrating tonight. I'm asking a simple question. We haven't discussed percentages. Then what have you discussed? Mom looked toward the dining room. Don't do this now. Do what? Make everything a test. Dad called from the table. Are those rolls coming? Mom picked up the basket and pressed it into my hands. Your father needs to know you believe in him, she said. He brought you into this. I carried the rolls back to the table. For years, I remembered that sentence as something Mom said because she was stressed. Later, I understood it was the arrangement in its simplest form. Dad brought me in, so anything I built still counted as something he gave me. The Prairie Grid assessment started Monday morning. My badge was waiting at the security desk. It had my photograph, the company name, and a red stripe marking me as a contractor. I clipped it to my shirt and met Samuel outside the maintenance planning room. He introduced me to the supervisors and told them I had access to their open work records. One of them asked, Who approved that? I did, Samuel said. Nobody asked again. For the first time since joining my parents, I had access because somebody had clearly defined it. Samuel didn't tell people I was helping. He told them what I was responsible for and what I was allowed to see. That difference changed how they treated me. The work itself was messy. Prairie Grid had requests in 3 different systems. One supervisor kept a private spreadsheet because he didn't trust the central list. Parts orders were printed and placed in a tray, even when the work request was electronic. By Wednesday, I'd found a repair that had been waiting 6 weeks because maintenance thought purchasing had ordered a motor. Purchasing thought maintenance was still confirming the specifications. I brought both supervisors into the same room. The purchasing supervisor crossed his arms. Nobody sent us a final number. The maintenance supervisor pulled an email from a folder. It's right there. That's a model family, not a part number. They started talking over each other. I walked to the whiteboard and wrote 3 questions. What exact part do we need? Who is sending the order? When will the confirmation come back? They stopped arguing long enough to answer. The order went out that afternoon. On Friday, Samuel stood beside my temporary desk and placed a printed copy of the confirmation in front of me. That repair has held up a production change for over a month, he said. I know. You found it in 3 days. The supervisors found it. I put them together. He gave me a direct look. That's what I'm paying your company for. At first, I thought he was only complimenting the work. Then he asked for my business card. I didn't have one. Dad had ordered cards for himself and Mom. Mine were supposed to come later. I'll bring one next week, I said. Samuel nodded. Make sure it has your direct number. That afternoon, I ordered my own cards. I used the company template, added operations director beneath my name, and paid for them with my personal debit card. I didn't ask Dad for permission. That was my tiny rebellion. The bigger truth came at the end of the 30 days. Samuel asked Dad and me back to the same conference room. My final report was on the table, marked with yellow tabs. He approved another 3 months of work. The scope was larger, and the fee was enough for us to hire our first 2 employees. Dad shook his hand. We won't let you down, he said. Samuel turned to me. I want Amanda as the project lead. Dad's smile tightened. Of course. She works under me. Samuel didn't argue. He just wrote my name on the first page and circled it. In the parking lot, Dad said, You did good. It was the first clean praise he'd given me since I started. I held on to it much longer than I should have. 2 days later, he handed me the job descriptions for our new employees and asked me to train them. Mom gave me enrollment forms for the company health plan. The coverage cost more and paid less than the plan I'd left. I signed anyway. I told myself the sacrifice was temporary. Every new responsibility made the company more stable. Stability would lead to ownership. Ownership would mean Dad had kept his word. The part I didn't want to examine was how badly I needed that to be true. I needed the company to prove I belonged beside them, not behind them. So when Dad took credit, I corrected the work instead of the story. When Mom asked me to protect his confidence, I did. When Justin drifted in and out, I made room. I even saved the first box of my new business cards in Dad's office cabinet because that was where we kept the important company supplies. The next morning, I took one card out, clipped it behind my Prairie Grid badge, and went back to work. The badge and the card stayed together for the next 10 years. The Prairie Grid project kept expanding. The 3-month assignment became another 6 months, then a yearly service schedule. We hired planners, analysts, and field coordinators. I trained every one of them at the warehouse before putting them in front of a client. Dad kept attending opening meetings. I handled what came after. Mom managed invoices, payroll, and benefits. Whenever we needed a policy, she asked me to draft it. Whenever an employee objected to that policy, she sent the employee to me. You explain things better, she'd say. That also meant I became the person associated with every deadline, correction, and unpleasant answer. Dad got to tell people we were building something together. Mom got to say her door was always open. I got to explain why timesheets were due by noon. Prairie Grid became our largest client. Samuel expected direct answers, and he noticed when someone tried to give him a polished answer instead. Once, Dad promised we could staff a weekend shutdown with 5 days' notice. Samuel looked at me. Can you? We can cover planning, I said, not full coordination. Dad gave me the same warning glance he'd used in our first meeting. Samuel said, then give me the planning cost. We completed the work without exhausting our staff. The following Monday, Dad told me I'd embarrassed him again. I asked, would you rather I promise something we can't deliver? I'd rather you trust me to manage the client. You handed the question to me because you know the schedule exactly. He closed his office door after I left. That night, Mom called. Your father thinks you don't respect his experience. I respect his experience. I don't respect making promises with other people's weekends. You could have discussed that privately. Samuel asked me in the meeting. Mom sighed. You always have a reason. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop still open. What are you asking me to do? Let him lead. I do. No, you let him speak. That isn't always the same thing. I didn't answer. She softened her voice. Amanda, this business means everything to him. It means everything to me, too. I know. That's why we need you. There was the sentence that always brought me back into line. We need you, not we value you, not you have authority. Need was easier. Need gave me a task before I could ask what I was receiving in return. The next morning, I apologized to Dad for correcting him in front of Samuel. Dad accepted without apologizing for making the promise. Then he asked me to solve a staffing problem. I solved it. By 2021, we had 23 employees and regular work from several smaller manufacturers. Prairie Grid still provided the foundation under most of it. Their payments covered payroll during slow months and gave other clients confidence that we knew what we were doing. That summer, Justin began coming to the warehouse on Fridays. Nobody announced it. He just appeared one morning carrying coffee for Dad and Mom. He set a cup on my desk. Oat milk, right? I drink it black. Since when? Since always. He laughed and took the cup back. More for me. I asked why he was there. Dad wants my thoughts on growth. What kind of growth? Sales? Positioning? Maybe some partnerships? Are you working here? I'm helping. Is the company paying you? His smile changed. You doing payroll audits now? I run staffing. This isn't staffing. What is it? He took a drink from the cup he'd brought for me. Ask Dad. So I did. Dad was standing beside a wall map where we marked client locations with colored pins. Justin had added 3 pins in cities where we had no clients. What's Justin doing here? I asked. Dad kept looking at the map. He has contacts. Is he an employee? Not at the moment. Is he a contractor? Why does it matter? Because he's talking about partnerships and putting prospects on our board. Dad turned toward me. He's giving me advice. About a company he hasn't worked in. He's worked around plenty of companies. That isn't what I said. Dad's mouth tightened. I don't need permission to talk to my son. I didn't say you did. It sounds like you resent him being here. I want to know his role. He doesn't have one. Behind me, Justin said, This is why I didn't want anything formal. I hadn't heard him enter. Dad looked past me. You don't have to explain yourself. Justin leaned against the doorframe. I'm trying to help. If Amanda wants me gone, I'll go. He said it calmly. That was one of his better tricks. He could enter a room without responsibility, then make the other person responsible for whether he stayed. I looked at Dad. Did you ask him to come? Yes. Then he can stay. I need to know what information you're giving him. Dad folded his arms. He's family. That's not an access level. Justin laughed under his breath. Dad said, You've become very territorial. I walked out before I said something they could use to avoid the question. For 3 more Fridays, Justin sat in Dad's office. He attended one sales call and suggested we describe ourselves as an industrial transformation company. After the call, I asked him what that meant. It opens doors. What do we deliver after the door opens? That's your side. My side was everything after the door opened. I started paying closer attention. I didn't snoop through Dad's desk or read anybody's private email. I checked the things I was responsible for. First, I reviewed payroll. Justin wasn't on it. Then I checked our contractor list. His name wasn't there either. Finally, I opened the shared sales calendar. Dad had invited Justin to 4 prospect meetings during the next month. I'd been invited to 1. That was the inconsistency I could confirm without guessing. Justin supposedly had no role, but Dad was giving him access to conversations that shaped the company. I supposedly ran operations, but I was being brought in only when a prospect needed details. I printed the calendar, not because it proved anything dramatic. It didn't. I wanted to ask one question without letting Dad change the facts underneath it. I carried the page into his office Monday morning. You said Justin doesn't have a role. He doesn't. He's invited to 4 prospect meetings. Dad glanced at the page. So? I'm invited to 1. You're busy. So is he working on sales? He may help with sales. That's a role. Dad pushed his reading glasses onto his forehead. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Building a case. I printed a calendar. Exactly. I sat across from him. You promised me ownership when the company became stable. His expression went still. This again. Yes, this again. We've had this conversation. We've had pieces of it. I want a date. For what? A written ownership proposal. Dad took off his glasses and set them on the desk. Prairie Grid's agreement comes up for renewal next year. We don't know what that's going to look like. They've renewed every year. That doesn't guarantee anything. So stability means, after the next renewal, it means when your mother and I are comfortable. That could mean anything. It means we took the financial risk. I took a pay cut. I built the services. I trained the staff. And you've been paid. I felt my hands go cold. Dad saw my face and leaned back. Don't twist that, he said. I'm not dismissing what you've done. You just reduced it to a salary. I said we've all contributed. What has Justin contributed? This isn't about Justin. Then why is he in prospect meetings? Dad stood, which meant the conversation was finished. Prairie Grid is the priority. Get that renewal handled and then we'll sit down as a family. I took the calendar from his desk. By when? After the agreement is signed. Say a month. He looked irritated, but he nodded. Within a month. That was the first deadline he'd ever attached to the ownership promise. I wrote it in my desk calendar while he watched. The Prairie Grid renewal wasn't a simple extension. Their procurement department wanted one master services agreement to replace the yearly proposals and separate work orders we'd been using. Samuel sent us the first draft early in 2022. It was more than 40 pages. Most of it dealt with insurance, payment terms, confidentiality, and how projects would be approved. I reviewed the operational sections. Dad skimmed the pricing pages. Mom sent the insurance requirements to our broker. Samuel and I spent 2 weeks working through staffing expectations. He wanted Prairie Grid protected if we changed key people without warning. Their managers had built processes around our team, and they didn't want a new lead arriving one Monday with no history. The draft named me as key project lead. Dad noticed during our internal review. Does your name need to be in the agreement? He asked. Samuel requested it. What happens if you're sick? We provide temporary coverage. This is about a permanent change. Dad tapped the page. I don't like a client telling us who to employ. He isn't. We can change the lead. Then why name you? Because we need Prairie Grid's approval for the replacement. Dad looked at the heading, named Key Personnel Continuity Condition. It's Section 7.3. What happens if they don't approve? They can suspend new work. Then we have 10 business days to present somebody acceptable. And after that, they can terminate. Dad gave a short laugh. Over one employee? Over continuity in a program they're paying us to run. He pushed the draft toward me. Make it less restrictive. I negotiated the operational requirements directly with Samuel. Prairie Grid kept the condition, but we clarified what an acceptable replacement needed to know. Current workflows, reporting schedules, plant contacts, active projects, and safety procedures. Those were all reasonable things. I trained our staff on them every day. When the final agreement arrived, Prairie Grid's annual commitment was $480,000. It was the largest contract our company had ever signed. Dad read the amount twice. Mom pressed both hands over her mouth. I checked section 7.3. It still named me. Samuel signed for Prairie Grid. Dad and Mom signed for our company. I received a complete copy because I managed the work. The next morning, I placed a one-page ownership proposal on the conference table at the warehouse. Dad looked at it but didn't sit down. Mom said, "Can't we enjoy the agreement for 1 week? You both agreed we'd discuss this after it was signed." "We will," Dad said. "We are. Right now." Justin wasn't there, but his empty coffee cup was still on the counter from the previous Friday. I pointed to the proposal. "I'm asking for a membership interest and written authority over operations." Dad read the first paragraph. Then he asked, "Did somebody put you up to this?" "No, Samuel. Samuel has nothing to do with our ownership." Mom picked up the page. "Why does this have to feel so formal? Because informal has lasted 6 years." She looked at Dad. He said, "We need time to review it. You said within a month, and we will." I left the proposal with them. Then I made a deliberate choice I should have made years earlier. I called Justin before anyone could prepare him. He answered from his car. "What's up? I need you to tell me exactly what Dad has offered you at the company." He was quiet for a few seconds. "Why?" "Because he says you don't have a role, but you're in sales meetings. I'm done asking around the edges." Justin exhaled. "Nothing is official. That isn't an answer." He said, "When I'm ready, I could come in on the leadership side." What does leadership side mean? Growth? Clients? Direction? Above me? I don't know, Amanda. Did he discuss ownership? Another pause. He said the company would stay with the family. I'm family, I know. Then why didn't you say me? Justin's voice became careful. Dad thinks operations and leadership are different things. There it was. Useful, plain, and still incomplete. "How long have you known that?" I asked. "A while. Since before I joined?" "I don't remember exactly." He remembered. I could hear it in the space before his answer. After we hung up, I wrote down what he'd said and the time of the call. Then I opened a new folder in my home desk and placed the note beside my ownership proposal. My objective changed that afternoon. I was no longer waiting for my parents to remember their promise. I was going to make them answer it. 3 weeks later, Dad finally put a meeting on the calendar. He scheduled it for 4:30 on a Friday, which meant he wanted an ending time built into the conversation. Mom brought my proposal in a blue folder. She had highlighted 3 lines and written question marks beside them. Dad closed the conference room door. "We've reviewed what you gave us," he said. I waited. Mom opened the folder. "We agree your contribution should be recognized more clearly." "What does that mean?" "A salary adjustment," Dad said, "and a performance bonus." "What about membership?" "We're not changing the ownership structure right now." I looked at Mom. "You said this would be mine too. It is yours in every way that matters, not legally." Dad pushed his chair back. "There you go again." "Where am I wrong?" "We have personally guaranteed company obligations," he said. "Our savings are tied up in the building. You haven't carried that risk. I've carried 6 years of building the operation, and you've earned a good living. I would have earned more if I'd stayed at my old job." Mom looked hurt. "Then why didn't you?" That stopped me. She asked it like my decision to trust them had become evidence that the arrangement must have been fair. Dad tapped my proposal. "You're asking us to hand over part of an asset we financed. I'm asking you to keep your promise. We said we'd take care of you." "No, you said ownership." Mom folded her hands. "Your father and I remember that conversation differently. You were sitting across from me. We were discussing a future possibility. I could hear silverware being sorted in the break room. One of our employees laughed in the hallway. The ordinary sounds made the room feel stranger. I asked, 'Have you discussed ownership with Justin?' Dad's eyes shifted to Mom. That was enough, but I made him answer. 'Have you?' 'We've discussed the future with both of you,' he said. 'You haven't discussed it with me. I had to put a proposal on the table.' 'You're here every day,' Mom said. 'We talk to you constantly about work. Work is the company, only when you need something done.' Dad stood. 'I'm not sitting here while you insult us. I'm asking what you promised Justin. He's our son, and I'm your daughter. Then stop treating this like a negotiation between strangers. The irony of that sentence was so clean, I didn't have to respond. Mom slid a second page across the table. It listed the raise and bonus they were offering. The raise was substantial. The bonus depended on Prairie Grid renewing its approved work each year. I read the page twice. This keeps my compensation tied to the account I already run. It rewards results, Dad said. It also gives me another reason not to leave. Mom leaned forward. Why are you talking about leaving? I'm explaining what the paper does. It's a generous offer. It was generous compared with my current salary. It was not ownership. That was the harder part to admit. They hadn't offered me nothing. They had offered me enough to make refusal expensive. I had a mortgage by then. I had health insurance through the company. Most of my professional reputation was tied to Morales Process Solutions. If I walked away, I couldn't take our staff, our client records, or the systems I'd built for company use. I knew how to begin again. I also knew exactly what beginning again would cost. I want your answer about membership in writing, I said. Dad stared at me. You have our answer. Then write it. Why? So nobody remembers it differently later. Mom looked down at the folder. Dad said, fine. That was the practical win. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it ended the fog around the question. On Monday, Mom emailed me a short statement. Dennis and Mary would retain all membership units. My role would remain operational. Any future transfer would be decided through family succession planning. The final sentence said the company valued my leadership. I printed the email and placed it in the folder at home. Then I accepted the raise. I signed the compensation page knowing exactly what it was. Money in place of authority. A reward for results without a claim on what those results created. I told myself I could keep working while I decided what came next. Instead, work decided for me. Prairie Grid began adding projects under the new agreement. One plant needed a reporting change. Another needed its maintenance backlog sorted before a shutdown. We hired 4 more people, and 2 of our experienced employees needed promotions. For the next year, I was either at the warehouse or at Prairie Grid. Dad started taking Wednesday afternoons off. Mom shortened her Fridays. I approved schedules, reviewed invoices, handled client problems, and trained the supervisors we promoted. Justin stopped coming by for several months. When I asked Dad about him, Dad said, he's got his own opportunities. The way he said it made me feel petty for asking. Then Justin returned with another business idea. He wanted us to offer a subscription package to small manufacturers. Clients would pay a monthly fee for remote support, templates, and scheduled calls. I asked him, who provides the support? Our team. Which people? We'd decide that. How many hours does each client receive? Don't get lost in delivery yet. Delivery is what they're buying. He looked at Dad. This is what I mean. Every new idea gets buried in questions. Dad said, Amanda, let him finish. Justin finished. His proposal had pricing, a logo concept, and a list of potential clients. It did not include staffing, service limits, or an estimate of how many clients we could support. Dad loved it. For 3 weeks, I turned it into something usable. I set boundaries on call hours, created an intake form, and assigned 1 coordinator to test it with 2 small accounts. 1 client stayed. The other left after the first month. Justin told Dad the test had been too cautious. At a family dinner, Dad said, your brother sees where the market's going. I was passing him a bowl of green beans. Then he should run the next test, I said. Justin looked up. I can. Good. I'll send you the service calendar. Mom said, Amanda. What? You know Justin has other responsibilities. So do I. Dad set down his fork. Nobody said you don't. Then he can either own the idea or stop criticizing how I carried it. Justin wiped his mouth with his napkin. I don't need you to carry anything for me. I nodded. Good. The next morning, I sent him the calendar, client notes, and a blank weekly report. I copied Dad. Justin replied, got it. By Thursday, he had missed the first client call. The coordinator came into my office holding her laptop. "Are you joining this?" she asked. "No, Justin is leading it. He's not on the call. Did you contact him?" "Twice." I looked at the time. The client had been waiting 6 minutes. I could have joined. I knew the account. I knew what they needed. Instead, I said, "Call Dad. Ask whether he wants to lead it or reschedule." Her eyes widened slightly. I had never sent a problem upward when I could solve it myself. She called Dad. He came out of his office, joined the meeting late, and spent the next 40 minutes finding answers Justin should have prepared. The client stayed, but Dad was furious. He came into my office and closed the door. "You let me walk into that blind. I gave Justin everything. You knew he wasn't there. I knew you assigned him authority. You could have covered the call." "I could cover every call. That doesn't make it my responsibility." Dad lowered his voice. "You wanted him to fail." "No, I wanted him to do the work." He left without answering. Justin appeared the following Friday. He didn't apologize to the coordinator or explain why he'd missed the meeting. He stood in my doorway and said, "You made your point. I wasn't making a point. You embarrassed Dad. You missed the call. I had something come up. Then you notify the client. You're enjoying this." I turned my monitor so he could see the missed call notes. "This is the report you agreed to complete. It's still blank." He stared at it. Then he said, "You know, if you ever want to lead at a higher level, you're going to have to stop obsessing over small mistakes." I looked at him for a few seconds. "You don't get to evaluate my leadership." He gave me a thin smile. "We'll see." That was the first assignment I refused to rescue. The company survived it. Dad had to perform the work, and Justin's absence was visible to someone besides me. It should have changed the pattern. Instead, it changed their approach. For the next few years, Justin became less visible at the warehouse, but more involved with my parents outside it. He attended dinners at their house without me. Dad took him to manufacturing events. Mom began saying things like, "Justin has some interesting ideas about the future," without telling me what those ideas were. When I asked directly, she said nothing had been decided. I kept the company running. In early 2026, Dad canceled our regular operations meeting with less than an hour's notice. The calendar update said family discussion at 5 that evening. Justin was already in the conference room when I arrived. He sat beside Dad. Mom had arranged 4 copies of a document on the table, one in front of each chair. I didn't sit. "What happened?" "Nothing happened," Mom said. "Sit down." The first page had our company name at the top. Beneath it was a notice of membership transfer and management appointment. Dad and Mom had transferred controlling membership units to Justin. The effective date had been the previous Friday. I read the line again because my mind kept trying to turn it into something else. Justin would serve as Chief Executive Officer. Dad and Mom would remain involved as advisors. I would continue as Operations Director and report to Justin. I looked at Dad. "You already signed this?" "Yes. You said nothing had been decided." "We were working through the details," Mom said. "The effective date passed. We wanted to tell you together." I turned to Justin. "How long have you known?" He rubbed one thumb along the edge of his copy. "A few months." Dad said, "This wasn't an easy decision. It looks like a completed one." He leaned forward. "Justin is better suited to carry the family name at the top." I looked at the company name printed between us. "My last name is Morales." Mom said, "That isn't what your father means. What does he mean?" She looked at Dad, but he didn't help her. Justin did. "He means clients expect a certain kind of person in the chief executive role." "Which kind?" "A relationship person. Somebody focused outward. I won Prairie Grid." "You built the operational relationship," Dad said. "That's different." "Different from what? From leading the whole company?" The room became very quiet. I asked Mom, "Did you vote for this?" She pressed her lips together. "Your father and I agreed." That answered another question I'd spent years protecting her from. I picked up my copy of the document. Dad said, "This doesn't reduce your importance. It reduces my authority." "Your day-to-day role stays the same," Justin said. "Then why do I report to you?" "Because somebody has to make final decisions. Somebody already did." Justin sat back. This is exactly the defensiveness we need to move past. I turned to Dad. What do you expect me to do now? He answered without hesitation. Help your brother succeed. Mom reached for my hand. I stepped back before she touched me. I'm taking this home, Dad said. That's your copy. I want the full transfer documents. You don't need them. I need to know who has authority over my employment. Justin said, I do. It was the first direct answer anyone gave me that evening. I folded my copy once and placed it in my bag. Then I looked at him. Send every change you want from operations in writing. His expression sharpened. Why? So I know what you're actually asking me to carry. The next morning, his first written assignment was waiting in my inbox. He wanted me to prepare a complete client handover, train him on Prairie Grid, reorganize the staff under his new structure, and build the presentation for a public company relaunch on Harrison Avenue. He gave me 6 weeks. The 6 weeks were divided into 87 tasks. Justin had attached a spreadsheet to his email. Every row had my name in the owner column. His name appeared only beside final approval. I read it twice, then walked to his new office. He had taken Dad's office at the front of the warehouse. Dad had moved into a smaller room near the conference area. The change had happened over the weekend. Justin's framed appointment notice was already hanging on the wall. I placed the printed spreadsheet on his desk. Who created these deadlines? I did. Based on what? The launch date. That isn't what I asked. He leaned back. We've got 6 weeks. Work backward. I have active client work and a staff to manage. That's why I need you to delegate. To whom? You tell me. We're fully assigned. Then adjust. I pointed to the line for Prairie Grid. What does complete client handover mean? You train me on the account. That would take months. It took you months because you built it from scratch. It took me years to understand every plant contact and workflow. I don't need every detail. Then you don't want a complete handover. He smiled like I was proving his point. This is the kind of language that makes simple things difficult. I sat down across from him. What role do you expect me to have after the launch? Operations Director. With what authority? The same authority you have now. I report to you now. Yes. You approve hiring? Yes. Pricing. Final approval. Client commitments? Anything significant. Then it isn't the same authority. He folded his hands. You're getting stuck on labels. I'm asking who makes decisions. I do. That's what chief executive means. Then what are you handing over to me? Execution. He said it without hesitation. The answer was useful. It removed the last possibility that this was ceremonial. Justin intended to take authority while leaving me responsible for every result. I picked up the spreadsheet. I'll give you a realistic plan by tomorrow. I already gave you the plan. You gave me deadlines without available staff. Amanda, I'll send you what we can actually complete. He stood as I reached the door. I need to know you're with me on this. I'm at work. You know what I mean. I turned around. No, I know what you want. That's different. By noon, Dad had called me into his smaller office. He hadn't unpacked. 2 boxes sat against the wall, and his old company photographs were stacked face down on the floor. You're making the transition harder than it needs to be, he said. I asked Justin what my role is. He says you challenged every decision. He sent me 87 tasks, then organized them. That's what you're good at. Did you read the list? I don't need to read every internal document. You transferred control to someone who doesn't know what the staff can carry. Dad rubbed his forehead. This is temporary. What is? The confusion. My lack of authority isn't confusing. You still have influence. Influence can be ignored. He looked toward the closed door. Give your brother a chance. I gave him the subscription test. He missed the client call. That was years ago. It was the only time he had to deliver his own idea. Dad's chair creaked as he shifted. He's grown since then. How would I know? You planned this without me. We knew you'd react emotionally. I looked at the boxes behind him. You moved out of your own office before telling me and I'm emotional? His face hardened. "Don't be disrespectful." I left before the conversation could become another demand that I apologize. That afternoon, I moved the relaunch spreadsheet to the conference room wall. I used blue notes for client work, yellow for staff tasks, and pink for launch items. 3 employees stopped to look. One of our supervisors asked, "Are we really changing all reporting lines before the Prairie Grid shutdown review?" No. The spreadsheet says we are. I'm revising it. Justin told us the new structure starts next Monday. That was the first I'd heard of it. I found him near the front entrance with a vendor who was measuring the wall for a new sign. I waited until the vendor left. "You told the staff the reporting structure changes Monday." "That's right. The relaunch is 6 weeks away. I want the team used to it before then." "You didn't tell me it's on the spreadsheet." The spreadsheet listed staff reorganization. It didn't include a start date. "Who reports where?" I asked. "I'll send the chart." "When?" "End of day. I need it before people start changing assignments." He glanced toward the conference room wall. "You put my plan on sticky notes?" I mapped capacity. "It looks chaotic. It shows the conflicts. It shows the entire warehouse that you don't support the transition. The staff already knows I wasn't consulted." His expression changed. "Who told them that?" "Nobody had to." He looked past me toward the employees working at their desks. "Take the notes down. I'm using them to finish the schedule. Use your computer. The team needs to see what moves." I said, "Take them down." I removed the notes. I photographed the wall first, then rebuilt the schedule at my desk. By the next morning, I had reduced the 87 tasks to 31. I assigned dates based on staff availability and marked 12 items that required Justin to provide information or make a decision. He rejected the plan in 7 minutes. His email said it lacked urgency. I replied with one question: "Which active client commitment should I delay?" He didn't answer. Instead, he sent the new organization chart to the entire company. My name was 1 level below his. 3 supervisors who had reported directly to me were shown under a new executive coordination box controlled by Justin. The box had no employee in it. It was just a shape between him and the people doing the work. One supervisor came into my office. "Who do I ask about overtime now?" "Me. Until Justin says otherwise." He said, "The chart starts Monday." "I know." "So does he approve it?" "I don't know." She stood there waiting for a better answer. I couldn't give her one. That afternoon, I sent Justin a list of 14 decisions the chart had made unclear. Overtime, schedule changes, hiring requests, client escalations, expenses, time off. He answered only the first question. All final authority rests with CEO. I printed the email, then I opened the executed Prairie Grid agreement. Section 7.3 was exactly where I remembered it. My name appeared beneath the heading. A permanent replacement required Prairie Grid's prior approval. If an unapproved change occurred, Prairie Grid could suspend new work and give us 10 business days to present someone acceptable. I wasn't looking for a weapon. I was trying to understand whether Justin's chart had already created a contract problem. It hadn't, not yet. A reporting change inside our company didn't automatically replace me as project lead. I was still performing the work. Samuel still called me. The Prairie Grid team still came to me for decisions. But Justin's handover task made his objective clear. I carried the agreement to his office. "Have you spoken to Samuel about replacing me as project lead?" He looked up from his phone. "I'm not replacing you." "Then what am I handing over? The relationship." Section 7. Point 3 names me. He waved one hand. "I'm aware. Prairie Grid has to approve a permanent replacement. Eventually, before the change." "There isn't a change yet. You told me to train you. Training isn't replacing." "Then what happens after the relaunch?" He set down his phone. "I become the executive contact. You continue managing delivery. That's a change Samuel needs to understand. It's normal for a chief executive to own the client relationship. Prairie Grid didn't hire a title. They hired the company. They negotiated the continuity condition because they wanted a specific project lead." Justin's jaw tightened. Do you think you're the only person capable of doing this? No, because that's how you sound. I think a replacement needs to know the account and receive approval. I'll know it after you train me, not in 6 weeks. He leaned forward. You are going to prepare the handover. I'll handle Samuel. When? At the launch. I stared at him. You're planning to tell him in public? I'm planning to present the company's future. He's invited. Does he know the event includes a change to his account? He knows I'm CEO. That isn't what I asked. Justin stood. I'm not letting procurement language dictate how I run my company. It dictates how Prairie Grid buys our work. My company, he repeated. There was nothing accidental about it. I took the agreement back to my office. The launch invitation arrived in my email later that day. Justin had designed it as a celebration of a new era of visionary leadership. His photograph filled the top half. Dad and Mom appeared below him under Founding Legacy. My name wasn't on it. A second attachment contained the presentation draft. Slide 3 described Justin as the leader who had turned a family concept into a scalable industrial workflow firm. Slide 4 listed the Prairie Grid relationship as the first proof of his market strategy. I walked into Mom's office with my laptop. Did you approve this? She read the slide and looked away. Justin's trying to tell a simple story. It isn't true. It's promotional language. He wasn't working here when I won Prairie Grid. Nobody's saying you didn't contribute. The slide says his strategy created the relationship. We all know what you did. Then why not say it? Mom closed her office door. Because the event is about the transition. From whom? Apparently not me. She lowered her voice. Your brother needs credibility. So you're giving him mine. That's not fair. It's exactly what the slide does. She touched the edge of my laptop. Let him have his moment. My work isn't his moment. Her hand dropped. Amanda, we are trying very hard to keep you in this family. I looked at her. What does that mean? It means the way you're behaving has consequences outside this office. I'm objecting to a false presentation. You're refusing to support your brother. Those are not the same thing. They feel the same to him. I waited for her to hear herself. She didn't. That evening, Dad called and invited me to Sunday dinner. The invitation sounded ordinary until he added, "We need to settle this before the launch." I asked, "Settle what? Your attitude." I almost declined. Then I looked at the Prairie Grid agreement on my desk and the false presentation on my screen. "I'll come," I said. My objective had changed again. I wasn't going there to persuade them to recognize me. I wanted each of them to say plainly what they expected me to surrender, and I wanted to hear it without fixing the answer for them. Sunday dinner started with roast chicken and 10 minutes of conversation about the weather. Mom had set the table with the good dishes. Dad poured wine. Justin arrived on time for once and sat in his usual chair. Nobody mentioned the launch until Mom cleared the dinner plates. Then Dad folded his napkin and said, "We need to get back on the same side." I looked around the table. "What side is that?" "The family's side," Mom said. "What does the family need from me?" Justin leaned back. "We need you to stop fighting the transition. I'm not fighting the transfer. It's already done. You're undermining it." "How?" "You challenged the organization chart in front of the staff. I asked how they should handle overtime. You put my plan all over the conference room wall. I mapped the workload. You refused the handover schedule. I gave you a schedule we can complete. Dad held up one hand. This is what we're talking about. Every answer has a correction attached, because every accusation leaves out what happened. Mom sat beside me. "Amanda, nobody's accusing you." Justin gave a short laugh. I looked at him. "What do you actually want? I want you to train me without acting like I'm stealing state secrets. I want you to prepare the relaunch. I want you to reassure the staff. And when Samuel arrives, I want you to make it clear that Prairie Grid has your full support under my leadership. That's 4 different things." He looked at Dad. "See? I kept my voice level. Do you want me to remain Prairie Grid's project lead? Yes. Do you want to be presented as the person who created that relationship? I created the strategy that will grow it. You weren't there. I'm here now. That doesn't change when the work happened. Mom touched my arm. Why do you need the presentation to be about you? I don't. I need it not to lie. It's a launch presentation, Dad said, not sworn testimony. The staff knows the truth. The staff needs confidence, Justin said. They don't need a family dispute. You put the family dispute on a slide. His face tightened. Dad said my name in a warning tone. I turned to him. You asked me here to listen. I'm listening. Tell me what happens if I refuse to support the false history. Mom said, nobody called it false. I just did. Dad stared at the table for a moment. Then we may have to reconsider whether operations director is still the right position for you. The room went quiet. I asked, is that an ultimatum? No, Mom said quickly. Justin said, it's accountability. Dad rubbed one hand over his jaw. A senior employee has to support the chief executive, even when he takes credit for her work. Amanda, stop saying takes. What word would you prefer? Mom stood and began collecting glasses that didn't need collecting. We don't have to settle every phrase tonight. That's why nothing ever gets settled. She carried the glasses into the kitchen. Dad lowered his voice. Your mother hasn't slept properly all week. I didn't transfer the company. You've made the aftermath difficult. What did you think would happen? I thought you'd be disappointed. I didn't think you'd turn against us. I looked at him. Is asking for the truth turning against you? You're forcing us to choose. You chose before you told me. Justin said, this is going nowhere. He stood and picked up his plate. Dad stopped him. Sit down. Justin remained standing. Why? She's decided she's the victim. I asked him, if you believe you're qualified, why do you need me to build the presentation and train you? Because that's your job. You're the chief executive, and you report to me. That answers my question. He set his plate down hard enough to rattle the fork. I have spent my whole life being compared to you, he said. That surprised me. Compared how? You're the organized one, the responsible one, the one who never screws up. Who told you that? Everybody. Dad excused every job you left. You think that felt good? I think it meant you always had somewhere to land. And you think I asked for that? You accepted it. His mouth opened, then closed. For 1 second, we were closer to an honest conversation than we had ever been. Then Dad stepped in. This is exactly why Justin needs a real chance, he said. I turned toward him. At what? To prove himself. With the company I spent 10 years building? Mom had returned from the kitchen. She stopped behind her chair. Dad looked directly at me. The company your mother and I own. There it was. Not the company we built. Not the family company. The company they owned. The ownership promise had never been delayed. It had been available whenever they wanted to use it against me. I nodded once. What happens to my salary and benefits if I don't support Justin's version of the launch? Mom said. Why are you asking that? Because Dad just questioned my position. Nobody is taking your benefits, she said. Unless. Dad pushed his chair away from the table. I'm not discussing hypothetical threats. You made the threat. I said we may need to reconsider your role. What does that mean? It means we can't have an operations director who refuses direction. Justin sat down again. I looked at each of them. So my choices are to train him, present him as the source of work I created, and remain responsible for delivery, or risk my job. Mom's eyes filled, but her voice stayed firm. You're making it sound cruel. I'm making it sound clear. We're asking you to help your brother. You gave him control. That doesn't mean he doesn't need support. Then you should have made support a condition before you gave it to him. Dad said, he doesn't need conditions from you. I stood. Mom reached for my wrist. Please don't leave like this. How should I leave? We're still your family. Then ask me to stay without mentioning work. She let go. Nobody did. I drove home with the radio off. At a red light, I realized I'd left the container of leftovers Mom had packed for me on the kitchen counter. I almost turned around for it. That was how trained I was to return before anyone had to ask. I kept driving. At home, I took out the folder from my desk. I read Mom's email from 2022. Dennis and Mary would retain all membership units. Any future transfer would be handled through family succession planning. They had completed that planning. They just hadn't included me. I pulled out a blank sheet of paper and began listing what leaving would cost. Salary, health insurance, my annual bonus, access to the warehouse, my company email, the title I had used for 10 years, daily contact with employees I had hired and trained, Prairie Grid, the account that had shaped most of my professional life. My mortgage payment was due in 9 days. I opened my bank account and calculated how long I could manage without income. If I cut everything unnecessary, I had several months. Not a year, not enough to drift. Then I opened a new document. I typed, "Please accept this letter as notice of my unconditional resignation from Morales Process Solutions. Effective at the end of business tomorrow." I stared at the sentence for a long time. My original goal had been ownership. Then it became recognition. Then I wanted a truthful role under the structure they had chosen. None of those goals were enough anymore. If I stayed, every task I completed would help prove Justin could lead. Every problem I prevented would become evidence that my parents had chosen correctly. I would keep building the case against myself. I finished the letter. I didn't mention the ownership promise. I didn't mention Justin's presentation. I didn't threaten Prairie Grid's agreement or ask for money. I thanked the company for the opportunity and said I would return all company property by the end of the next day. Then I printed 2 copies. If you've ever reached the point where being needed wasn't enough, leave the word enough in the comments. The next morning, I arrived before 7. I placed 1 signed copy of the resignation letter in an envelope for Justin. I kept the second copy in my bag. Then I began separating company property from mine. The laptop belonged to the company. So did the phone, warehouse keys, Prairie Grid badge, credit card, and 2 external drives. The framed photograph of the first Prairie Grid team belonged to me because Samuel had given it to me after our first year. I took that home. I opened my desk drawers one at a time. Pens stayed. A ceramic coffee mug came with me. The old business card clipped behind my expired temporary badge was mine, but the badge itself belonged to Prairie Grid. I removed the card and returned the badge with the rest. At 8:15, I went to Justin's office. Dad and Mom were already there. Justin looked at the envelope in my hand. "What is that?" I placed it on his desk. My resignation. Mom sat down. Dad said, "Don't be ridiculous." Justin opened the envelope and read the first sentence. "Effective today? End of business. You're supposed to give notice. My employment agreement doesn't require it. You're operations director until 5. Mom said, "Amanda, please sit down. I have property to inventory." Dad took the letter from Justin. "This is because of dinner?" "No." Dinner answered my questions. "What questions?" "What you expect from me and what happens if I refuse." Justin read the letter again. "This says unconditional." "Yes." "So what do you want?" "Nothing." He looked genuinely confused. Dad stood. "We can fix this. You completed the transfer. There's nothing to fix." "We can adjust the presentation," Mom said. "This isn't about one presentation." Justin said, "Then stay through the launch. We'll discuss your role afterward." "No, you can't hand over Prairie Grid in 1 day. I'm not handing it over." Dad's face changed. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm resigning." "Justin has the authority to assign the account." "He doesn't know the account," Mom said. I looked at her. She pressed her hand against her mouth. Justin said, "You're doing this to damage me. I'm leaving a job. Before the largest public event we've ever held. You chose the date. You agreed to attend. I agreed before you assigned me the event." Dad moved closer. "What about the staff? You own the company. Justin runs it. You'll decide. They trust you." "So did I." Nobody answered. I spent the rest of the day documenting open tasks without creating a handover plan. I listed each client project, its current status, and where the company's records were stored. I did not copy anything for myself. At 4:30, Mom came into my office with the benefits summary. "Your coverage ends at the end of the month," she said. "Thank you. You'll lose the performance bonus." "I know." She stood beside my desk while I packed the final drawer. "You could take a leave instead." "No." "Then give us 2 weeks." "No." "Why are you being so absolute?" "Because every softer boundary became more work." She looked toward the hallway. "What are we supposed to tell people?" "The truth." I resigned. "What are we supposed to tell Samuel? That's Justin's responsibility." Her eyes moved to the executed Prairie Grid agreement on my desk. I closed it and placed it in the company file tray. At 5, I carried the laptop, phone, drives, cards, keys, and badges into Justin's office. He checked each item against my inventory sheet. When he reached the Prairie Grid badge, he held it between 2 fingers. "I'll tell Samuel after the launch," he said. I looked at him. "Why?" "Because he's already traveling for it. I don't want unnecessary drama before we can explain the transition properly. He believes I'm leading the account. I'll handle Samuel." Dad was standing near the window. Mom sat with her hands in her lap. None of them asked Justin to call him that day. I signed the property return sheet, took my copy, and walked out of the warehouse with 1 cardboard box. My salary had stopped. My benefits had an end date. My family still expected me to protect the launch, but victory no longer meant making them admit what I had built. It meant refusing to build the lie that replaced me. The first thing I did the next morning was turn off the alarm set for 6. I woke up at 6:12 anyway. For several minutes, I lay there listening to a garbage truck empty bins behind the houses on my street. My body expected me to be late. My phone expected me to solve something. There were 11 missed calls. 4 from Mom, 3 from Dad, 2 from Justin, 2 from a supervisor at the warehouse. I didn't call anyone back immediately. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened the folder from my desk. I added my resignation copy, the signed property return sheet, and my final inventory. Then I wrote the date across the front. The phone rang again. "Mom." I answered. "Thank God," she said. "Where have you been?" "At home. We've been calling." "I saw. There's a payroll problem." I closed my eyes. "What kind?" "The payroll company says one of the approval files didn't transfer. Call their support number. They keep asking questions I don't understand. You managed payroll before I joined. That was 10 years ago. You still have the administrator access. Amanda, people need to be paid." "Yes." "Then help me." I looked at the folder on the table. No. She went silent. Not angry. Not yet. She sounded like she hadn't understood the word. "What do you mean?" "No. I don't work there. This happened before you left. Then the information is in the payroll folder. I'm not asking you to come back forever. I'm asking for 15 minutes. That's still company work. These are real people. I know. Call support." Her voice sharpened. "You're willing to let employees miss paychecks to make a point? I'm not in control of their payroll. You know how to fix it, so do you. I just told you I don't. Then learn." She inhaled sharply. "You don't sound like yourself. I sound like someone who resigned." She hung up. I placed the phone face down and stood at the sink until my coffee went cold. Every part of me wanted to call back. I could picture the payroll screen. I knew which approval file she meant. The correction probably would have taken less than 10 minutes. That was how it had always worked. Their emergency became proof that my boundary was unreasonable. I didn't call. Instead, I wrote down the time and a short description of the request. Not because I expected a lawsuit. I needed a record for myself. If I began helping, I wanted to be unable to pretend it was only once. Dad called 20 minutes later. "You need to call your mother." She hung up on me. "She's trying to pay your former co-workers. She has the support number. This is beneath you." "What is?" "Punishing innocent people. I left the company with payroll procedures and administrator access. You knew there would be loose ends. I documented every active task. You had 1 day. That was my decision. You don't get to make decisions that affect everyone else." I almost laughed. "That's exactly what you gave Justin authority to do." Dad was quiet for a second. "This isn't about Justin. It's about the company you gave him. You're still part of this family. Then call me about family. I am calling about family. No, you're calling about payroll. He hung up too. At 10:30, Mom sent a text. I figured it out. Everyone will be paid normally. I read it twice. That one sentence mattered more than she intended. She had solved the problem because I didn't step in. Nobody lost a paycheck. The company had functioned for one morning without me. I replied, "Good." She didn't answer. I made a rule after that. Any business request received a written response. I would confirm where company information had been left if it was already listed in my inventory. I would not explain a process, enter a system, contact a client, or complete a task. I emailed the rule to Dad, Mom, and Justin. Justin replied within 3 minutes, "This is unnecessarily hostile." I wrote back, "It prevents confusion." His next email said, "You created the confusion by leaving without notice." I attached the property return sheet he had signed. He didn't respond. That afternoon, I reviewed my finances again. My checking account looked healthy only because my last salary payment had arrived. I moved enough money to cover my mortgage and utilities for 3 months. I canceled a weekend trip I'd planned for later that summer. I reduced my phone plan and removed 2 subscriptions I barely used. Then I called the number on my benefits paperwork. The replacement health coverage cost much more than the employee plan. I enrolled anyway. The first payment came out immediately. That was the first time the resignation felt expensive in a way I could touch. A smaller bank balance, a cancellation email, a plastic insurance card that hadn't arrived yet. The next day, I removed Morales Process Solutions from my email signature. I didn't announce a new business. I wasn't ready, and I wasn't going to create the appearance that I had left to compete for company clients. I made a list of rules for whatever I did next. No company records, no copied templates, no contact with current Morales clients, no recruiting Morales employees, no use of confidential pricing, no suggesting that Prairie Grid would follow me. I knew those limits would make starting over slower. I also knew Justin would search for a reason to call my resignation sabotage. At the bottom of the page, I wrote, "Build from a blank document." So I did. I opened a blank file and tried to describe what I knew how to do without looking at anything from the company. Map work requests, clarify responsibility, build usable schedules, train supervisors, find where information stops moving. The words looked plain. They were supposed to. I stopped after 1 page and saved it under my own name. At noon, the warehouse supervisor who had called on my first morning sent a personal text. "Can you tell me who approves weekend hours now?" Justin says CEO. Dad says department lead. Chart says executive coordination. I read it, then deleted the response I started writing. I sent, "I'm no longer employed there. Please ask Justin to confirm in writing." She replied with a thumbs up. An hour later, Justin emailed me. "Stop directing employees to me." I answered. She asked, "Who currently has authority?" I told her I'm no longer employed and directed her to the CEO. He called immediately. I let it go to voicemail. His message lasted almost 2 minutes. "You need to stop playing games. You built these employee relationships on company time. You don't get to walk out and create chaos, then sit back while everybody comes to me with questions you could answer. If people contact you, tell them to use the chain of command. Do not send them directly to me." I saved the voicemail. Then I emailed him 1 sentence. "Please provide the chain of command to your employees." He didn't answer. On Friday, Dad came to my house. He stood on the porch holding a white bakery box. Through the window, I could see his truck parked crooked at the curb. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Your mother sent cinnamon rolls," he said. "Thank you." I took the box. He remained on the porch. "You've made your point. I resigned. You keep saying that like it ends every obligation. It ends my employment obligations. What about us? What are you asking from me as your daughter?" He looked past me into the house. "Come to the launch. That's a company event. It's also a family event. Which part is family? Your mother and I will be recognized. Justin will be introduced. People who've known us for years will be there. You want me in the room so it looks like I approve. I want my daughter there. Would you still want me there if I refused to answer work questions?" His jaw moved slightly. "Why would anyone ask you work questions?" "Because the invitation still lists Prairie Grid. Samuel knows Justin is chief executive. He doesn't know I resigned." Dad looked down at the porch boards. That confirmed Justin hadn't told him. I asked, "Do you plan to tell Samuel before the event?" "Justin is handling it. I know what Justin said. I'm asking you." Dad's voice became defensive. "This is why we need you there. You know Samuel. You can help keep the conversation calm." "No, I'm not asking you to work. You just described work. I'm asking you not to create a scene. I haven't contacted Samuel. We appreciate that. You appreciate that he doesn't know." Dad looked toward his truck. "We need time. You've had years to prepare a replacement. We didn't know you'd walk out. You knew you were removing my authority. That's not the same as expecting you to abandon the company." The word abandon landed exactly where he meant it to. I set the bakery box on the entry table. "If I attend, I'll attend as your daughter. I won't answer client questions, handle staff, present anything, or support claims I know are false." Dad's expression eased too quickly. "So you'll come?" "I haven't decided. Your mother needs an answer. The launch is more than a month away. The guest list closes next week. You already invited me." "That isn't the same as knowing you'll be there." I looked at him. "Email me what you're asking." His face tightened again. "Why does everything need to be in writing?" "Because spoken promises keep changing." He left without saying goodbye. The cinnamon rolls stayed unopened until evening. Then I ate one over the sink and froze the rest. On Monday, Mom sent an email titled "Family Request." It asked me to attend the launch, sit at the family table, appear in photographs, and be available for brief, supportive introductions if needed. I replied with the limits I had already given Dad. No company work, no client discussion, no presentation, no statement supporting the new company history. Mom called as soon as she received it. I didn't answer. Her voicemail said, "You are turning a simple family appearance into a contract negotiation." I saved that message too. By the end of my first week away, I had slept through the night twice. I had also spent more money than I earned because I earned nothing. Still, the company had processed payroll. Employees had received authority questions from the person who now claimed authority. I had not logged into a system, touched a file, or called Samuel. My strategy was working. That was why Justin changed tactics. He stopped asking me for help and began telling people I had left during a critical transition without warning. I learned because Dad forwarded me an email by mistake. It was a draft message for the relaunch guests. One line explained my absence from the presentation by saying I had chosen to pursue independent opportunities after declining a collaborative transition role. I had not announced any independent opportunity. At the bottom of the email, Justin had written a note to Dad. If she attends, this wording keeps her from contradicting us without making herself look bitter. I printed the email. Then I accepted the launch invitation. I replied only to Mom and Dad. I'll attend his family under the boundaries already stated. Within 10 minutes, Justin sent me a separate message. Glad you've decided to support us. I answered. I decided to attend. I did not agree to support your version of my departure. His reply came almost immediately. We'll discuss expectations before the event. I closed the email and placed the printed draft in my folder. My clean exit had worked once. They had managed without me. Now they knew they couldn't pull me back through work, so they were going to use the room. The room started working before I entered it. 3 days after I accepted the invitation, the warehouse supervisor texted me again. Justin held an all-staff meeting. He said you refused to complete a transition and asked everyone not to contact you. I read the message at my kitchen table. Did he say why I resigned? I wrote, no. He said leadership changes are hard for some people. A second message arrived. He also said company materials can't be discussed with former employees. I probably shouldn't be texting, I replied. Understood. Don't put your job at risk. She didn't answer. That was a real loss. I had trained her. We'd worked through late shutdown changes and bad client schedules. Now she had to treat me like a possible threat because Justin controlled her paycheck. I didn't send her my resignation letter. I didn't forward his emails or explain the ownership promise. Any private defense could be framed as recruiting or interference. My clean exit protected me, but it also required silence while he described it. The next morning, Dad asked me to meet him and Mom at a coffee shop near downtown Guthrie. They were already seated when I arrived. Mom had ordered tea for me. It was the kind I drank years earlier before I switched to coffee. She pushed the cup toward me. "We need to resolve the launch language," she said. Dad placed a printed page between us. It was a statement written in my voice. "I'm proud of my family and grateful for the opportunity to help build Morales Process Solutions. As the company enters its next chapter under Justin's leadership, I'm confident the team will continue serving clients with the same commitment and care." My name was typed beneath it. I read the page once. "What is this for?" "The program," Dad said, "and possibly the press material. There isn't press. There may be local business coverage. You want to publish this as my statement?" "With your approval," Mom said. "I don't approve it." Dad leaned back. "What part is offensive?" "The part where you wrote words for me. Then change them. I'm not submitting a statement." Mom touched the edge of the paper. "We need something that shows there isn't a family crisis. There is a family crisis. Why would you want strangers to know that?" "I don't." "Then help us keep it private." I pushed the statement back. Keeping something private means not discussing it. It doesn't mean publishing a false answer. Dad's voice dropped. "You have put us in an impossible position." I resigned. "Yes, Amanda, we know." Two people at a nearby table turned slightly. Dad lowered his voice further. "You resigned one day after receiving a direct assignment from the new chief executive. How do you think that looks?" "Accurate. It looks like you couldn't accept your brother's authority. I couldn't accept the arrangement. What's the difference? I could have accepted reporting to someone qualified. I could not accept building his credibility while he erased my work." Mom's face tightened. "That is such an ugly way to describe your brother. It's what the presentation does." "We revised the slides," she said. "Did you remove the Prairie Grid claim?" Neither answered. I looked at Dad. "Did you?" "We adjusted the wording." "To what?" "Justin will be presented as leading the company's strategic expansion." "That isn't what I asked." "The historical details are unnecessary. They became necessary when he claimed them." Mom folded the statement in half. "If you won't provide a supportive message, we need you to agree not to discuss internal decisions at the event. I already agreed not to perform company work." "That isn't the same thing," Dad said. "What are you afraid I'll say?" He looked directly at me. "That we gave Justin something that belonged to you." I waited. He continued. "It didn't belong to you. You're right. You made sure of that." Mom whispered, "Please." Dad's face reddened. "No, she needs to hear this. We funded the company, we held the units, we had the right to choose our successor. You did." "Then stop acting like a crime occurred. I never called it a crime. You're documenting every conversation like we're criminals." "I'm documenting what happens." "Why?" "Because you keep changing it." Dad stood so quickly his chair scraped the floor. "If you embarrass this family at the launch, don't expect to walk into our home afterward like nothing happened." Mom looked up at him. "Dennis." He didn't take it back. I asked, "Is that what you both want?" Mom stared at the folded statement. "I want you to sign this," she said. "That wasn't my question. We want you to support your family." I stood too. "I won't sign it." Dad left first. Mom stayed at the table. As I picked up my bag, she said, "You're choosing a contract over people." I stopped. "What contract?" "Prairie Grid. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You think without you, they'll leave. I haven't contacted them, but you know they might. So does Justin." Mom's eyes shifted toward the window. "Your brother says the provision is routine. Then he should follow it. He says Samuel likes you and will be flexible. Has he asked Samuel? She didn't answer. I sat down again. Does Justin plan to identify an approved replacement before the launch? He is the replacement. That isn't how it works. He's the chief executive. The agreement doesn't name a title. It names a project lead. You wrote that section. I negotiated the operational requirements. Prairie Grid required continuity. You could explain that it no longer applies. I can't change their agreement. You could tell Samuel you support Justin. That wouldn't make him qualified. She pulled the folded statement closer to herself. You want them to reject him? No. I want you to stop asking me to guarantee him. After everything we did for you. I looked at the untouched tea. What did you do for me? She flinched. We gave you a career. I gave you 10 years. And now you're willing to watch the company suffer. You transferred control without requiring a transition. We assumed you wouldn't leave. I know. Mom picked up her purse. Before she left, she said, Your father means what he said. If you go there intending to humiliate us, it will change this family permanently. I sat alone until the tea went cold. That afternoon, Justin sent the revised launch program. My statement wasn't included. Instead, the program listed me under with appreciation to our former operations director. It said I had completed a leadership transition before pursuing independent work. I hadn't completed one, and I wasn't pursuing work yet. I replied, remove the claim that I completed a transition. Justin answered, the program is final. I wrote, your handover spreadsheet was not completed. I resigned before training you. The claim is false. He copied Dad and Mom into his response. Amanda provided complete project status records upon departure. Management considers the transition complete. That wording was careful. He had changed leadership transition into project status records without correcting the program. I replied once. The status list identified open work and record locations. It did not train or approve any replacement. Nobody answered. 2 days later, a vendor I'd worked with for years sent a short personal email. Sorry to hear the transition didn't work out. Justin said you decided consulting was a better fit. Wishing you well. I hadn't told the vendor I was becoming a consultant. I wrote, thank you. I haven't announced my next step. Then I deleted 3 paragraphs explaining what had happened. The vendor replied with a single thumbs up. Justin's version had left the warehouse. I updated my personal professional profile that evening. I changed my status from operations director to former operations director. I listed my employment dates and the work I had actually performed. I did not mention Justin, the transfer, or my resignation. Within an hour, Dad called. You need to remove the Prairie Grid reference. My profile says I led industrial workflow programs, including the company's first major manufacturing account. Everyone knows which account that means. It's public company history. You're trading on our client. I'm describing my work. You're positioning yourself against Justin before the launch. I haven't announced a business. You don't have to. People can read between the lines. So can they read the launch program. Dad ended the call. The following morning, my profile no longer appeared on the company's staff history page. An older page about Prairie Grid had also been edited. It now said the company's leadership team had secured the relationship. My name had been removed. I took screenshots. Then I sat at my desk and considered the 2 direct ways I could respond. I could publish the resignation letter and the original company history. That would protect my reputation with employees and vendors, but it would turn a private employment decision into a public fight. Or I could email Samuel. I still had his address from years of correspondence, but I had no company authority and no current work reason to contact him. A simple message saying I had resigned would correct what Justin was hiding. It could also trigger Section 7.3 before the launch. I opened a blank email. Samuel, I'm writing in a personal capacity to let you know that I resigned from Morales Process Solutions. I stopped there. He deserved accurate information. Prairie Grid was preparing for new work based on an agreement that named me. The employees also depended on that agreement. $480,000 a year supported more than my parents. If I contacted Samuel now, Justin would say I had used a client relationship to retaliate after losing ownership. He would be wrong about my reason. He might not be wrong about the effect. I saved the draft and walked away from the computer. That evening, Mom left a voicemail. "We still want you at the launch. Your father is upset, but he'll calm down if you don't make this worse. Please just come, smile for the photographs, and let Justin handle Samuel." She still wanted my face in the room. She just didn't want my voice. I listened twice. Then I deleted the draft email to Samuel. I would not secretly set the contract in motion. I would not contact employees, vendors, or clients to defend myself. I would attend under the boundaries I had stated. But if someone asked me a direct question, I would answer it. That choice had a price. The answer could damage the company, cost employees work, and end whatever remained between me and my parents. Silence would be cheaper for everyone except me. I accepted that before I closed the laptop. 2 mornings later, Justin forwarded me a calendar invitation from Samuel. The subject line read, "Prairie Grid Opening Work Session." It was scheduled for 11 at the warehouse, 45 minutes after Justin's launch presentation. The location was the smaller conference room near the loading doors. Samuel's note said, "Amanda, please bring the current shutdown backlog and we'll use the first hour to confirm priorities." Justin had added one sentence above it. "This is why you need to cooperate." I read the invitation carefully. Samuel still believed I was leading the work. He expected me to have access to current records. He expected an ordinary project session after the public presentation. Justin had forwarded the invitation instead of correcting him. I replied only to Justin. "I resigned and returned all company information. I will not conduct this session." He called immediately. "This isn't a full session," he said. "Samuel always writes more than he means. He asked for the current backlog. I'll get it from the team. Then you can conduct the session. I haven't been inside every active project. That's why he has to approve a qualified replacement before the change. We've discussed this. No, I asked whether you contacted him. You didn't answer. I told him I'm taking the executive relationship. That isn't approval of a replacement. He congratulated me. Did you tell him I resigned?" Justin paused. "I told him the team was evolving. Did you use the word resigned?" "No, because it's not relevant to him. It's specifically relevant to him. I am not turning a family employment dispute into a client crisis. You already invited the client into it." His voice became quieter. "Just sit in the meeting." "No, you don't have to lead. If he asks something technical, answer it." "No. You're willing to sit there and watch me struggle." "I'm not attending a work session. You agreed to come to the launch. As family. Nobody will understand that distinction. I put it in writing." He made a frustrated sound. "This agreement belongs to the company. You don't get to use it as personal leverage. I haven't used anything. You keep mentioning the section because you keep asking me to pretend it doesn't exist." He was silent for several seconds. Then he said, "Samuel is practical. Once he sees that I have control, he'll work with me." "Maybe." "You sound disappointed." I sound finished with the conversation. I ended the call. The invitation removed one uncertainty. Prairie Grid had not approved a replacement. Samuel didn't even know he needed one. I printed Justin's forwarded email and placed it with my resignation letter. That afternoon, Mom emailed my final benefits notice. It confirmed my employment end date and the last day of company coverage. A separate payroll statement showed my final salary payment. The performance bonus was absent. I didn't contest it. I printed both notices. Together, the papers made the situation simple. I had resigned. The company had accepted the resignation, ended my benefits, stopped my salary, and taken back its property. Nobody could honestly claim I was still an employee because I attended a family event. Dad tried anyway. He called that evening. "Justin says you're refusing to sit with Samuel. I'm not employed by the company. You know the history. You can ease the transition without doing any actual work." "What do you think a transition is?" "Conversation. About company work. Don't play with words. I'm not." He exhaled heavily. Your brother is under enormous pressure. He wanted the position. He didn't expect you to walk out. Neither did you. No. The honesty surprised me. Dad continued, "We thought you'd be angry for a while. We thought once you settled down, you'd understand why the structure made sense. What were you expecting me to understand? That Justin could represent the company while you protected the operation. Protected it from what? Instability, mistakes, growth that moved too fast. You gave control to the person you expected to create those problems. We gave him a chance to rise to the responsibility, and you assigned me the consequences." Dad didn't answer. I looked at the folder on my desk. "What happens if I don't help at the launch? You already know how I feel. You said not to come back to your house if I embarrass you. I was upset. Are you taking it back?" He became quiet. "Your mother expects us to stay a family. That isn't an answer. You always force everything into yes or no. Some things are. Then no," he said. "I'm not taking it back. If you stand there and damage the company in front of everyone, I don't know how we come back from that. I'm not planning a speech. You don't need one. You know what silence can do." He was right about that. If Justin said I had completed the transition and I stood there smiling, my silence would support him. If someone asked and I answered, my parents would treat the truth as an attack. Dad said, "You can still choose the family. I did that for 10 years. That's not fair. I'll see you at the launch." I ended the call before he could turn the event into another test I had already failed. The following day, I received the final guest program through the event website. Justin had removed the sentence about me completing a leadership transition. That was one practical result of my objection. The new wording said I was being thanked for past operational contributions. Justin's biography filled most of the next page. It described him as a business strategist who had guided the company into its expansion phase. The timeline began with Dad and Mom forming the company. It jumped from the warehouse purchase to Prairie Grid and then to Justin's appointment. My name appeared once in the thank you line. I could have corrected it easily. The guest list included several vendors and local business owners I knew. The event website allowed attendees to send a message to the group. I could have attached the original Prairie Grid project scope, Mom's written denial of membership, Justin's false program draft, and my resignation letter. People would have understood. They also would have received private company documents they had no business seeing. Employees would arrive at work inside a public family fight. Samuel might cancel before anyone explained what had actually happened. It would have felt satisfying for about 10 minutes. Then I would have become the person Justin was already describing. I closed the website without sending anything. The day before the launch, Mom asked me to come to the warehouse for a family photograph. I almost refused. Then I decided I wanted to see the room before it filled with people. The front half of the warehouse had changed completely. Tall black curtains hid the workstations. Round tables covered the open floor. A stage stood against the brick wall where our old service map had once hung. The new company sign was mounted above it. Justin's photograph stood beside the stage on a panel taller than I was. The words beneath it said, "Vision for the next decade." Dad wore a new gray jacket. Mom had her hair pinned up. Justin moved between the stage and the sound table, speaking into a wireless microphone. "Good," Mom said when she saw me. "You came. For the photograph." She looked at my plain blue dress. "Is that what you're wearing tomorrow?" "Yes. We're wearing navy and gray. I know. The photographer is trying to make everything consistent. I'm not changing the dress." Mom pressed her lips together but let it go. The photographer placed Dad and Mom in the center. Justin stood beside Dad. I stood beside Mom. Justin looked at the arrangement. Shouldn't the chief executive be in the middle? Dad immediately moved. The second arrangement put Justin between our parents. I stood at the end. The camera flashed 6 times. Afterward, Justin asked me to stay for the presentation rehearsal. "No, you're already here. I came for the photograph. I need to know where you'll be sitting when I recognize the family." Mom said, "Just show her." Justin pointed to a table near the stage. "You're beside Mom. When I thank you, stand up. What are you thanking me for? Your service. I'm not standing for the false company history. The thank you is separate. Then I'll decide in the moment. He lowered the microphone. You're going to make this difficult, aren't you? I'm going to sit at the table. Dad approached from behind the curtain. What's happening? Justin said. She won't agree to stand. Dad looked at me. It's a courtesy. So was telling me before you transferred control. Mom closed her eyes. Dad said, We are 1 day away. Can you please stop reopening this? I didn't bring it up. Justin placed the microphone on a chair. Fine. Sit there. Don't stand. Everybody will see exactly what you're doing. That's your choice. I picked up my bag. As I passed the smaller conference room, I saw a printed sign beside the door. Prairie Grid opening work session. Below it were 2 names, Samuel Hill and Amanda Morales. Justin had added his name in pen. I took a photograph of the sign. Then I found him at the sound table. Remove my name. The sign is already printed. Cross it out. That looks unprofessional. I won't be in that meeting. He glanced toward Dad and Mom. If Samuel asks where you are, what do you expect me to say? The truth? That you abandoned the account? That I resigned? He stared at me. You really don't care what happens after that. I care enough not to lie to him. His face became flat. Then maybe you shouldn't come tomorrow. Mom had heard him. She hurried over. No, we've settled this. Amanda is coming. Justin looked at her. She's planning to corner me. I'm planning to sit at your family table. And if Samuel asks, I'll answer. Mom took my hand. Can't you say you're taking time away? No. For me. No. Her grip loosened. I left before they rehearsed the presentation. At home, I laid everything on my desk. The resignation letter, property return sheet, benefits notice, final payroll statement, Justin's forwarded calendar invitation. I didn't need all of it at the launch. Samuel had the executed agreement in Prairie Grid's procurement archive. He could verify his own contract. I needed only proof of what I had done. I placed my retained resignation copy in a thin folder and put it in my bag. Then I rehearsed the question I expected. Are you still leading the Prairie Grid account? My answer required 4 words. No. I resigned. I tried adding an explanation. I removed it. I tried softening the sentence. I removed that too. The answer would change my relationship with my parents. It might end the agreement that supported the company. It would also be true. The next morning, I arrived at the Harrison Avenue warehouse 20 minutes before the doors opened. Mom met me in the lobby and checked my bag with her eyes. You brought papers. I brought my resignation copy. Why? In case somebody claims I still work here. Her face lost color. Amanda, please don't do this. I already did. You ended my benefits. Behind her, Justin stepped onto the stage and tested the microphone. Dad opened the front doors. I walked to the family table and sat in the chair with my name on it. The room filled faster than I expected. Employees came first. Most of them were working the event, checking name tags, arranging coffee, and directing vendors toward the display tables. Several looked at me, then looked away. The supervisor who had texted me gave a small nod. I returned it. Mom sat beside me for less than a minute before getting up to greet people. Dad moved through the room, shaking hands. Justin remained near the stage, smiling for photographs beneath his oversized portrait. A local equipment vendor stopped at our table. Amanda, he said, I didn't know you'd be here. I'm here with my family. I heard you're going out on your own. I haven't started anything. He looked confused. Justin said you wanted more freedom. I resigned. I haven't announced my next step. The vendor glanced toward the stage. Oh. He excused himself without asking anything else. Justin had told enough versions that people thought they knew what happened, but the versions didn't match. At 9:40, Dad tapped a glass near the coffee station. This isn't the formal program, he said, smiling. I just want to thank everyone for coming. People turned toward him. He talked about buying the warehouse, restoring it, and building a company rooted in family values. Mom stood beside him. Justin joined them after a few seconds. Dad placed one hand on Justin's shoulder. "We reached a point where the company needed a new kind of leadership," he said. "Someone prepared to take what we built and move it forward." A few employees clapped. Dad continued. "Justin has advised us for years. He understands where this industry is going, and he has the confidence to carry the Morales name into the next generation." My chair was less than 20 feet away. Mom looked at me while everyone applauded. Her expression asked for something. A smile, maybe. Approval. I kept my hands folded in my lap. Justin took the glass from Dad. "I wasn't planning to speak yet," he said. Which wasn't true because he already had a microphone clipped to his jacket. But Dad's right. This company started with a simple idea. Industrial work should make sense to the people doing it. That sentence came from my first service outline. He continued, "For the past several years, I've worked with my family to think beyond individual projects and build a scalable model." I heard one of the senior employees stop clapping. Justin gestured toward the wall displays. "Today is about the team, but it's also about direction. The transition is complete. Our clients will have stronger executive support. Our employees will have clearer leadership, and we are ready to expand." He looked directly at me when he said the transition was complete. Then he lifted the glass. "To the next decade." People repeated it. I didn't. Dad leaned toward me after the crowd began talking again. "You could at least raise the glass. I don't have one, you know what I mean." Before I could answer, Mom returned to the table. "Samuel isn't here yet," she whispered. I checked the clock. It was 9:52. Justin's main presentation was scheduled for 10. He went behind the curtain with the person managing the slides. At 9:58, Samuel walked through the front doors carrying a leather folder. He paused near the welcome table. His eyes moved over the banner, the stage, and Justin's photograph. Then he looked across the room. "Where's Amanda?" he asked. The conversations nearest him stopped first. I stood. "I'm Amanda." Samuel turned toward me. "Good. We're supposed to begin the Prairie Grid work session before lunch." Justin came out from behind the curtain. "Samuel," he said, "glad you made it." They shook hands. Samuel nodded toward me. I was confirming the work session. Justin kept smiling. "We've made a few adjustments to the schedule." "What adjustments?" "I'll be leading the executive portion. Amanda will help us with any transition details." I said, "No, I won't." Mom whispered my name. Samuel looked from Justin to me. "What am I missing?" Justin answered before I could. "Amanda recently decided to step away from her internal role. We've completed the transition, and I'll be your primary contact going forward." Samuel's face changed. "When did she step away?" Justin glanced toward the stage. "We can go through the organization after the presentation." Samuel looked at me. "Did you resign?" "Yes." The word carried farther than I expected. "When?" I gave him the date. "Are you still performing any work for Morales Process Solutions?" "No." "Are you leading the Prairie Grid account?" "No." Dad came closer. "Samuel, this is a family employment matter. The company remains fully committed to Prairie Grid." Samuel kept his attention on me. "Did you approve or train a permanent replacement?" "No." Justin stepped between the stage and our table. "I've been briefed on the account." I looked at him. "I gave you a project status list. I didn't train you." He turned back to Samuel. "The entire team is still in place." "That wasn't my question," Samuel said. "Who is the proposed key project lead?" "I am. Did you submit your qualifications to Prairie Grid?" No formal submission was necessary. Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Who told you that?" Justin's smile disappeared. "I'm the controlling member and chief executive. I assumed the authority change was an internal matter. The ownership change is internal. Key project continuity is not." Dad said, "There's no reason this has to happen in front of everyone." Samuel looked around the room as if noticing the silence for the first time. "You invited Prairie Grid to a work session." "We did," Dad said, "and we can have it privately. Not until I know who is authorized to lead it. Mom stood beside me. Amanda can explain that she supports the new structure. Samuel turned to me. Do you? I looked at Mom. Her face had gone pale. Then I looked at Samuel. I don't work for the company. I haven't approved a successor because I have no authority to approve one. Justin said, she's making this sound more complicated than it is. Samuel set his leather folder on the nearest table. He opened it and removed the executed Prairie Grid Master Services Agreement. The pages were held together with a black clip. I recognized the cover sheet and the yellow procurement tab beside the operational section. He flipped directly to section 7.3. Nobody had to tell him where it was. He read for less than a minute. Then he asked Justin, "Did you notify Prairie Grid in advance of Amanda's departure?" "No." "Did you request approval for a replacement?" "No, but as I said, I've taken over executive responsibility." Samuel tapped the page once. "This agreement names Amanda as key project lead. It requires prior approval before a permanent replacement." Justin looked at the contract. "We can submit that today. You can submit a candidate today. I am the candidate. Then submit your operational qualifications, account knowledge, and transition plan." Justin glanced at me. Samuel noticed. "Do not look at Amanda," he said. "I'm asking you." The room was completely quiet. Justin adjusted one cuff. "I understand the company's services. Which Prairie Grid sites are currently operating under approved work? I don't have that list in front of me. What is the current shutdown priority? That's a project-level question. It's the subject of the meeting you invited me to attend." Justin looked toward Dad. Dad said, "Our staff can provide all of that." Samuel closed the agreement. "The condition isn't satisfied by saying the staff knows." Mom stepped forward. "Samuel, we've worked together for years. Surely this can be handled without interrupting anything." Samuel's voice stayed even. "I'm not interrupting your management decision. I'm applying the agreement your company signed." He opened the contract again and placed one finger beside the section number. "Prairie Grid is suspending all new work under Section 7.3, effective immediately." A chair moved behind me. One of the employees whispered, "What?" Samuel continued. "Morales Process Solutions has 10 business days to present an acceptable replacement. Existing safety-critical tasks may be closed under current instructions. No new work will be authorized until continuity is resolved." Justin stared at him. "You're suspending a $480,000 annual agreement because one employee resigned? I'm suspending new work because your company replaced named key personnel without notice or approval. I didn't replace her. She quit. That still created the vacancy." Justin pointed toward me. "And she waited until today to tell you." Samuel looked at me. "Did you have authority to notify Prairie Grid after resigning?" "No. Did the company ask you to?" "No," Justin said. "She knew exactly what would happen." "Yes," I said. "So did you." Dad moved between us. "Enough." "Amanda, withdraw the resignation." I looked at him. "Right now," he said. "We can reinstate your benefits. We'll correct the paperwork before these guests leave." Mom took my arm. "Please. We'll work out everything else later." Justin lowered his voice. "Come back for 10 business days. Train me. Complete the handover, and then leave if that's what you want." Samuel stepped away from the table. He wasn't negotiating for me. He had stated Prairie Grid's position and was waiting. Dad said, "You wanted recognition. Fine. We'll recognize you in the presentation. I didn't resign over a slide. Then what will it take?" "Nothing." Mom's fingers tightened around my arm. "You can't mean that." "I do." Justin looked at the employees gathered near the coffee station. "You are humiliating this family in front of the whole company." I answered Samuel's questions. "You planned this. I didn't invite him to a work session." Samuel replaced the agreement in his folder. "The session is canceled," he said. "I'll send written notice today. Your deadline begins on the next business day." Justin stepped toward him. "Give us an hour. Let me make the presentation, then we'll sit down privately. The suspension is already effective. Samuel picked up his folder. Dad turned to me again. Amanda, say you're withdrawing the letter. No, I am asking you as your father, and I'm answering as the person who signed it. Mom released my arm. The employees were looking at Justin now, not me. Their belief had changed in one visible way. They had heard him say the transition was complete. Then they watched him look to me for every answer. Justin still held the microphone remote. The first slide glowed behind him with his name across the warehouse wall. Samuel walked toward the front doors. Before leaving, he looked back at Justin. 10 business days. Send 1 qualified name. Then he left. The presentation never started. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then the room broke into small, embarrassed conversations. Employees went back toward the coffee station. Vendors checked their phones. One man near the stage quietly removed his name tag and placed it on a table. Justin handed the presentation remote to Dad. "Get everyone seated," he said. Dad looked at the glowing first slide. "For what? We can still do the launch." Mom stared at him. Samuel just suspended the account. "We have 10 business days." Everyone heard him. Justin looked toward the guests. Then we explained that it's a routine contract review. I picked up my bag. He saw me moving. "You stay." "No, we need to speak privately. You can call me after the event." "There is no event now because of you." Dad said, "Justin." "No, Dad." She stood there and let him do that. I stopped beside the table. Samuel asked who replaced me. "You didn't have an answer." I said, "Me. You couldn't name the current shutdown priority." "That isn't chief executive work. It is if you want to replace the person doing it." Mom stepped between us. "Please, both of you. Not here." Justin pointed toward the smaller conference room. 5 minutes, Amanda." "No." His voice rose. "You owe us that." Several employees turned. I kept my voice low. "I don't owe the company another meeting." I left through the same doors Samuel had used. From the parking lot, I could hear Justin speaking into the microphone. "Thank you for your patience. We're making a minor schedule adjustment." I didn't stay to hear the rest. By noon, the event website had been taken down. At 3, Justin emailed me the written suspension notice Samuel had sent. He attached no message of his own. He highlighted the sentence giving the company 10 business days. I replied, "Received." He called an hour later. "I'll pay you as a contractor," he said. "No, name your rate." "No, I'm not asking you to come back permanently. Give me 2 days. You need Prairie Grid to approve a replacement. I need you to prepare me. You told everyone the transition was complete. Are you enjoying repeating that?" "No, you sound like you are." I looked out my kitchen window. A delivery truck was blocking half the street. "What has Samuel asked you to provide? A qualification summary, a continuity plan, and proof that I understand the active work. Then provide those. You know I can't learn 10 years of account history in 10 business days." "Yes. So you admit the requirement is unreasonable. It was reasonable when you had time to plan." He hung up. The next day, Dad called. He didn't ask me to return. He asked for the location of a Prairie Grid reporting guide. I told him it was listed on the inventory sheet under the shared operations drive. "We can't find it," he said. "Then ask whoever manages the drive." "You managed it." "Not anymore." He was silent. In the background, I heard a warehouse phone ringing. Dad said, "Your mother is helping with the backlog reports." "Okay." "She hasn't done that work before. Justin can assign someone. He assigned me." That was the first practical consequence, Dad admitted. He was back at a desk, searching for files and answering questions I had handled. I said, "The inventory tells you where I left everything." "I know." He ended the call without saying goodbye. On the 4th business day, Mom came to my house. She didn't bring food. She carried a notebook full of handwritten questions. "I'm not asking you to do work," she said from the porch. "I just need to understand what these terms mean." "That's work." "Amanda, please." I didn't take the notebook. She looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled into a loose clip, and blue ink marked the side of her hand. "Justin is meeting Samuel tomorrow," she said. "Then he should prepare. He is preparing. What are the questions? Which plants are active? Who approves schedule changes? How the shutdown reporting works? He should know those before presenting himself as replacement. He knows the company, not the account. Mom looked down at the notebook. Your father and I thought he would have more time. You had years. We thought you would train him. I know. That answer landed differently now. She sat on the porch step. We should have told you earlier. Yes. We should have made the transition part of the decision. You should have made competence part of the decision. She looked up at me. Would you help if Justin apologized? No. What if your father did? No. Her face tightened. Then what do you want from us? Right now, nothing. That isn't normal. Neither was what you asked me to accept. She closed the notebook. Samuel could end the agreement. Yes. Do you understand what that means for us? Yes. For the employees? Yes. And you can live with that? I took a breath before answering. I can live with not preventing the consequence of a decision I didn't make. Mom stood. That sounds very cold. It costs me too. How? I lost my job, my benefits, my client relationship, and most of my family in 1 week. You chose to resign. You chose the conditions. She left with the notebook unopened. Justin's review with Samuel happened the next morning. I didn't know the details until Justin called afterward. He refused me, he said. I was standing in the grocery store beside a shelf of canned tomatoes. What did he say? That I don't have sufficient operational knowledge. I waited. He asked questions no chief executive would normally answer. He wasn't approving you as chief executive. He wants another candidate, then present one. The supervisors know pieces. None of them know the whole account. That was the result of keeping every important decision with me while excluding everyone else from succession planning. Justin said, recommend someone. No, you train them. You control the company. Choose. If I choose the wrong person, Samuel rejects them. That's possible. You could tell me who he'll accept. I don't know who Samuel will accept. He lowered his voice. You want the contract gone. I wanted you to tell him before the launch. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He ended the call. On the 7th business day, the company submitted one of the supervisors as the proposed lead. Mom told me during a short phone call. She said the supervisor knew the daily reporting, but had never handled pricing, executive reviews, or cross-site planning. Prairie Grid requested more information. Justin asked me by email to provide a written statement saying the supervisor had completed key project lead training under me. I replied, that statement would be false. He sent back, she worked for you for 4 years. I answered, she was not trained or approved as my permanent replacement. That was the last request I received before the deadline. On the 10th business day, Mom texted me at 4:17 in the afternoon. Prairie Grid terminated the agreement. I sat at my desk with the phone in my hand. There was no satisfaction in the sentence. $480,000 in annual work was gone. So was the client relationship I had spent years building. I wrote, I'm sorry it reached that point. Mom replied, are you? I didn't answer. Samuel called me the following morning. I wanted you to hear this directly, he said. We ended the agreement under the continuity condition. I know. I'm sorry for the position you were placed in at the launch. Thank you, he paused. I also need to be clear. Prairie Grid can't discuss work with you while we close the Morales agreement and arrange replacement services. I understand. I didn't think you would misuse the relationship. I won't. I know. I still have to say it. I understand. That call closed the professional door as firmly as the termination closed theirs. Samuel didn't offer me a contract. He didn't invite me to take the work. He applied Prairie Grid's rule, then protected Prairie Grid. Justin called later that day. His voice was flat. We're canceling the expansion. What expansion? The additional staff, the second warehouse section, the subscription relaunch, all of it. I didn't respond. I'll be handling the remaining accounts directly, he said. Dad is taking scheduling. Mom is back on payroll and billing. That sounds necessary. You broke this company. No. You accepted control without learning it. You could have prevented the termination. Yes. He was quiet. That was the first time either of us said the cost plainly. Then he replied, "I won't forget that. I don't expect you to." He hung up. Dad didn't call. Mom stopped leaving messages. For the first time in my life, my family had a problem I could solve, and all three of them knew I would not solve it. The company remained open. The smaller clients stayed. Justin went to work every day because he no longer had an operations director absorbing the details. Dad returned to administrative work he'd spent years handing me. Mom learned the payroll system again. They paid in time, lost plans, and work. I paid too. My professional history ended with a suspended launch and a terminated account. My parents' house was no longer a place I could enter without remembering Dad's warning. My brother considered me the cause of his failure. I put the phone away and opened the blank page I had started after resigning. This time, I began writing what I could build next. I wrote a service description from memory, then compared every sentence against the rules I'd made for myself. Nothing came from a company template. Nothing named Prairie Grid. I didn't promise results based on work owned by Morales Process Solutions. The first version was terrible. It sounded like someone trying very hard not to say what she knew. I deleted it and started again. I help small industrial teams find where ordinary work gets stuck. That sounded like me. I registered a simple business name, opened a separate bank account, and rented one room in a shared office building near downtown Guthrie. The room had beige walls, a narrow window, and enough space for one desk and 2 visitor chairs. I bought the desk used. For the first month, nobody sat in the visitor chairs. I sent a short announcement to professional contacts who had never been Morales clients. I did not contact the company's vendors, employees, or active accounts. If somebody from that network reached out, I explained the boundary before discussing anything else. One former supplier colleague referred me to a small fabrication shop that had never worked with my family's company. The owner asked, "Do you have a standard assessment package? I'm building one." He looked uncertain. I could have shown him examples from my old work. I didn't have them, and I wouldn't have used them if I did. "I can give you a clear scope before you decide," I said. I spent 2 days creating that scope from a blank document. The shop hired me for a short assessment. The fee covered 1 month of office rent, insurance, and not much else. I still kept the payment confirmation open on my screen for several minutes. The work was ordinary. Purchase requests were arriving through email, text messages, and handwritten notes. Nobody knew which list was current. I put the people involved in one room and asked the same questions I had asked at Prairie Grid years earlier. What exactly is needed? Who has it now? When does the next person take responsibility? At the end of the project, the owner shook my hand. "This is easier to see now," he said. That was enough. I sent the final invoice from my own email address and deposited the payment into my own business account. The practice grew slowly. One assessment led to a training session. The training session led to a 3-month planning assignment. None of it was Prairie Grid work, and none of it came from a Morales client. I liked the smallness of it. When I promised something, I knew who would do it. When I needed to change a deadline, I spoke to the client myself. There was no visionary standing at the front of the room while I corrected the schedule behind him. Samuel sent one brief message several weeks after Prairie Grid closed its former agreement. "Glad to hear you're working independently. I wish you well." He didn't offer business. I didn't ask. I replied, "Thank you." That boundary mattered too. My parents remained silent for nearly 2 months. I heard small pieces about the company through public updates. The expansion section of the warehouse was no longer mentioned. The subscription service disappeared from the website. Justin's biography became shorter. The company still operated. Its remaining accounts were smaller, so Justin could manage them with help from the supervisors. Dad handled schedules and vendor calls. Mom handled billing, benefits, and payroll. Nobody called me when a file went missing. Nobody asked me to explain overtime. The family system had continued. It was simply required to function without its backup person. Then Mom emailed me. The subject line said, "Correction." She included a link to the company history page. The first paragraph still named Dad and Mom as the people who formed Morales Process Solutions and financed the warehouse. That was true. The next paragraph named me. It said, I developed the company's initial services, built its operations, trained its early staff, and secured Prairie Grid as its first major client. Justin's appointment appeared near the bottom, in 2026, where it belonged. I read the page 3 times. Mom's email contained only 2 sentences. Your father and I approved this correction. We should have published the truth from the beginning. I didn't reply that day. A corrected website couldn't return 10 years. It couldn't restore Prairie Grid, my role, or the ownership they had promised. It was still an action they had taken without asking me to rescue them first. The following morning I wrote, the history is accurate now. Thank you for correcting it. Mom asked whether I would meet her and Dad for coffee. I agreed to 1 hour in a public place. They arrived before me. Dad stood when I approached the table, then seemed unsure whether to hug me. I sat down instead. Mom held her cup with both hands. We're not here to ask you back, she said. Okay. Dad looked tired. He had a paper schedule sticking out of his shirt pocket. We couldn't ask that after what we did, he said. I waited. He looked down at the table. I promised ownership because I needed you to say yes. After the company became successful, I kept changing what success had to mean. Mom added, I helped him do it. Dad nodded. When Justin wanted a place, we gave him yours because we assumed you would build another place inside the same company. That wasn't yours to assume? No. He didn't explain. He didn't say he'd been trying to protect the family or that Justin needed confidence. Mom said, we treated your reliability like permission. That was the most accurate sentence either of them had given me. I'm sorry, Dad said, not for how the launch looked, for what we did before it. Mom's apology was quieter. I asked you to disappear inside your own work so your father and brother wouldn't feel small. I knew better. I believed they were sorry. I did not mistake that for repair. I'm willing to have limited contact, I said. No company questions, no client questions, no requests for advice through family conversations. Dad nodded. What if we just want dinner? Then invite me to dinner, Mom asked. At our house? Not yet. Her eyes filled, but she accepted it. We finished the coffee without discussing Justin. 3 weeks later, Mom invited me to lunch. Halfway through, she mentioned that their billing process had become difficult. Then she stopped herself. That's company business, she said. Never mind. It was the first test. I nodded and asked what she was planting in her garden. The second test came when Dad's schedule coordinator left unexpectedly. Dad sent me a text saying the office was having a rough week. He did not ask me to call anyone or review anything. I replied, I hope you find a good solution. He wrote, we will. They did. After that, I agreed to dinner at their house. Justin wasn't there. His chair remained beside Dad, but nobody asked me to sit in it. Mom set my place across from her. The conversation was awkward. Dad talked too much about a fence repair. Mom asked about my office, then carefully asked whether I wanted to discuss my work. I said, a little. They listened. Neither offered advice. When I left, Mom packed leftovers in a container. She didn't place a business folder beneath it or ask me to call the next morning. That counted as progress. Justin and I did not repair our relationship. He sent 1 email after the corrected history was published. You got what you wanted. I replied, the page is accurate. He answered, the company would be larger if you had stayed. I didn't respond. He continued running the reduced company. He attended client meetings, reviewed schedules, and handled decisions he once called project-level details. Maybe he learned from that. He never told me. My parents stopped asking me to forgive him. That was another change. Over the following months, I allowed 1 dinner every few weeks and occasional phone calls. If a conversation moved toward the company, I ended it politely. Once, Dad asked, can I get your opinion on a staffing issue? I said no. He looked embarrassed. Then he said, right, I'm sorry. He changed the subject. The boundary became less dramatic each time it held. I moved my practice into a slightly larger office when the shared building had one available. It still wasn't impressive. The carpet was gray, the window faced a parking lot, and the air conditioner made a clicking sound before it started. I bought a secondhand filing cabinet and placed it beside my desk. The folder from my home desk went into the top drawer. It contained the ownership email, transfer notice, false launch program, resignation letter, property return sheet, and benefits notice. I no longer needed to read them. For years, I had believed my place in the family depended on being the person who could fix everything. That belief made me useful, but it didn't make me respected. Respect began when I let their decisions remain theirs, even when I could see the cost coming. If you want more stories like mine, subscribe and tell me which city you're watching from. On a Friday afternoon, I finished a project schedule for a new client and sent it before closing my laptop. The office was quiet except for the air conditioner clicking near the window. My phone lit up with a message from Mom. "Dinner Sunday?" No business talk. I checked my calendar and replied, "Yes." Then I placed the phone beside the keyboard. The company across town would open Monday without me. Justin would manage its clients. Dad would review the schedules. Mom would handle payroll. Whatever went wrong would be solved by the people who owned the decision. On my desk, the last invoice of the week showed paid. 2 clean folders waited for Monday. My name was printed at the top of both. I opened the filing cabinet and looked once at the signed page that had ended my employment. The paper was still flat and clean, exactly as it had been the day I carried it out of the warehouse. I closed the desk drawer on my copy of the resignation letter in my own office.